And I am, I'm going to make Yulia a co-host just in case, you never know. All right, it's good to see you folks, Gerald and Andrew and Yulia, good to see you. Tonight we are going to continue our journey in Tableau, and we're going to focus on a variety of different charts that you can work with and ways of presenting information to make it more visual and to provide insights to those individuals who are viewing it. Hello. We are also going to be working with GeoJSON, and I'm going to show you a really cool online tool that allows you to take a spreadsheet, and provided it has latitude and longitude in it, and the interesting information. So for example, a list of restaurants, or Airbnb with latitude and longitude, you can convert it to a GeoJSON file, which then can be mapped to a boundaries file. I know it sounds like a lot of terminology, but again, we're going to take a very short hop into that towards the latter part of the class. All right. First part, we're going to work with some really cool data. And that being said, I hope you have downloaded the zip file from OpenHub. It has several GeoJSON files, and it has the Superstore CSV. So did everyone get a chance to do that?
We need all, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Right,
files, but there are only 2 XLS files, so we need all of them.
Actually, there should be no XLS
It
files.
says comma delimited. It's a CSV.
Right, it's a CSV, yes. So it's actually considered a text file from Tableau's point of view, right? Because it's not an XLSX, right? So yeah, right, you have a variety of different files that are in there. The GeoJSONs we will be working with later, so you can ignore those. I'm actually going to show you how to produce a GeoJSON using that free tool that I just talked about. And we're actually going to spend the first a couple hours working with Superstore data. Okay, so are there any questions before we get started?
What does JSON mean?
What does JSON mean? Andrew, do you know what JSON means?
I don't know what it means, but I know what it is.
All right, tell me what it is. Let's talk about what is it.
It's a way to make it easier for code to interpret data.
Okay.
Because it's like a, what is it called? It's not an API. It's a data format.
File format. You got it. You nailed it.
Okay.
And here's what's really cool about it. It is a lightweight file format, very similar to text or ASCII or XML, if you've ever seen XML. So the acronym is basically JavaScript object orientation. Right, notation, that's right. And when you add geo to it, you can just assume that it is representing all of the GIS related things such as polygons, latitude, longitude, spatially related artifacts or attributes. All right, so JSON is something that you really want to become friendly with, whether you're coding in Python or R, or let's say you weren't working with CSV files, you could actually work with JSON files, and you could work with them in R, you can work with them in Python, and you can work with them in Tableau. So, and you can work with them if you develop certain applications like games, will actually have, the ability to connect to JSON files to keep track of your, your inventory. Okay.
I've used JSON in a few different of my projects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the benefit of it is it's a known standard, right? It is utilized between different types of programming languages. So it is definitely something that individuals who understand the markup language of JSON could work with your files. So again, it has to have a very specific format, and we'll kind of explore some of those in a little bit. Okay. Hi, Carolina. Good to see you. Good to see you. Hi. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You want to open up Tableau, obviously, and we are going to be doing a sort of a case project, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and let's just do this the right way. Make sure we can see everything. Let me maximize this guy. All right. Okay, so you guys should be able to see my screen. Everyone should have Tableau open, hopefully. And yes, Jerry, good?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to work with a text file. Now, one of the distinctions I made earlier, and we'll wait for Jack to come in, is that a text file, when you work with a CSV, it's considered to be a text file. So you'll notice on my screen here, I can connect to a variety of different files here. I can connect to an Excel file, but it's assuming that it's an XLSX or an XLS, right? And so it has additional data binary associated with it based on the Excel dynamic, if you will. Or I could connect to a text file, a JSON file, an access file, or so on and so forth. I can also connect to a spatial file, which we're going to be working with later. Again, a spatial file is typically a file that is designed to work with a map. So it has geographical information in it. Right. So when you think about a spatial file, just as a differentiator between spatial and JSON, a GeoJSON file has that spatial data in it. So you would import a spatial file, a GeoJSON as a spatial file, because it's got those spatial qualities in it, like the polygons, the latitude, the longitude, and all that fun stuff. All right. So one of the key things is when you're connecting is knowing what to connect to. Otherwise, Tableau will not understand what you're trying to do. All right. So we're going to click on text file. All right. And you were given a superstore.csv. You want to click on that, find that in your treasure trove of goodies. All right. And this Superstore data set, if you will, if you're not familiar with it, or you didn't get a chance to look at it before class, it's basically like a Walmart or a large box store, if you will. They sell different categories of products. The city is associated with where each store is located. The container by which the items are, provided is there. The customer ID, the customer name, customer segment, department, discount, item ID, item description, number of records associated, order date, order ID. This is classic order stuff, right? Now, the additional data that is here, though, which is very interesting, is they've already done the calculation for the product-based margin and the profit, which is kind of nice. Those calculations are already done. And we were having a little bit of a discussion before class started tonight as to, when do I clean my data? When do I do feature engineering, right? And we all know that we could do feature engineering in R, we could do it in Python, we could do it in Excel, believe it or not, and do it prior to bringing the data into Tableau. Or we could create additional features that are calculated. If there's feature engineering that you need to accomplish that is related to non-numeric type of things, you would want to do that outside of Tableau. Really, Tableau is really good at doing the calculations for numerics, but when it comes to things like, splitting first name and last name and things like that, it's better to do it outside of Tableau. All right, so we basically see our unit price, our shipping cost. There's a lot of really good data here. It's not a really large data set. There's only 9,426 rows, but it's representative of what we want to work with. Okay. Any questions on the data set and what you see here? And don't forget, these little icons at the top of your columns represent the type of data that Tableau is perceiving. So for example, city has a little globe on it. That means that Tableau sees that as a geographic related column. Right. Everything else like ABC is text or string, right? The
But what's
pounds.
it telling us about city then?
What's it telling
Where the
us?
superstore is or where the product comes from, or?
Okay, so that's a very good point. So this data set is about the orders that were placed with a store, meaning that superstore, right?
Right.
And the customer and what have you. So you can infer that the city is related to the customer that purchased. Okay.
So the customer for telephones and communications comes from Irving.
Customer Irving.
No, the city, the customer comes from Irving.
Yes, exactly. All right. So that's basically what this is showing. Okay. Now, that being said, okay, the customer data, let's just focus on that really quick. The customer data. Now, Jerry, keep in mind that that's an estimated guess. One thing that we do not have is we don't have a data dictionary. And this lends into the conversation of, well, is this the city of the store or is this the city of the customer? So I'm taking a guess right now and saying, it looks like it's the customer. All right. Once we start visualizing the data, we may be able to change that. All right. So right now, without having any clarification, it would be essential to have either a data dictionary or change our naming conventions so that city makes sense, right? So if it's the customer city, anything related to the customer would be prefixed with perhaps CUST or something like that, so that we know this is tied to the customer, because this is a flat data set. Does everyone understand what this means when I say flat data set?
Not
No,
relational.
It is not, it is relational, but it's flattened. So Carolina, a flattened data set, when we start seeing two subjects together, customers and orders, right? And products, now we've got three separate subjects. So that means that we have data that potentially could be related, but it's in a flattened file, meaning it's all combined together.
got it.
Yeah, right. So it's actually denormalized, and it's representative of data that typically comes from a data warehouse. So it's not this is not coming from, let's say, the transactional data that is in operations. This is coming from a warehouse, and very much like the data dump that we worked with in our Python and R classes, right? It's data that lends itself to our analysis and or visualization, in this case visualization, but it is definitely flattened. Okay, so when you have a flattened data set, you might want to change your naming convention so that, or provide a data dictionary so that the visual analyst or the data analyst knows what they're working with. All right, so we are going to create our first sheet. We're going to click on sheet 1. And the first sheet we're going to name it as is sales by region. All right, so you want to just double click on the sales on the sheet tab, my goodness, and call it sales by region. Now, this is very similar to what we do in Excel. You can rename sheet tabs. You can organize them in a way that makes sense for you. Yes, Jack, go right ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Are you working on Superstore or Farmers Market?
Oh, we're on Superstore.
And you loaded it as a text file.
Yes, we loaded it, and we loaded it as a text file. You got it. Yep. So when you load it, you should see this on the screen here, just the one.
All right. I'm just curious. So when I loaded both, and I just want to know how you switch back and forth.
We don't want to switch. We don't want to switch back and forth because they're not related at all.
All right. So
do you have it?
How do I?
That's okay, Jack. Do you have it listed as a file like I do? If it's listed as a file and it's not two connections at once, then you're okay. Can you tell me how it's listed?
I see it the same way you do, but I can't, like, it says Farmers Market.
Where does it say Farmers Market?
Where it says in the area where it says need more data. So I was just trying to figure out.
Oh, okay. So you can drag that out. So let's say it's a tile like this. You can just drag it, kind of plop it towards the lower left. Yep.
Okay, and then drag the Superstore there.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Thank
yep.
you.
And you're welcome. And the data looks representative, like I have it down here. Like it looks. There's no combination or any farmers market related goodies in there. It's all Superstore. If you scroll to the left,
so if I
to
go
the right.
sheet 1, okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
If I go to Superstore, go to Analytics. How do I go back to that?
Okay, so go to your data source. Yeah, go to data source. On the lower left of your screen, you'll see a tab called data source.
Okay, got it.
Yep. And if you click on him,
yeah.
right? Yep, and you
Good.
scroll left to right, you'll see everything superstore.csv. It's always a good idea to check when that snafu happens that there's no stragglers from the other non-related.
By region.
So you see everything here is Superstore across the board.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. So you're all right?
I'm good.
Awesome, awesome. All right. Okay, so we have a sheet tab called Sales by Region. Now, our goal is we're actually building a bunch of different sheet tabs so that we could put it into a dashboard or what have you. Tonight's conversation is really about different styles of charts, different ways of representing the information to give you a way of comparing and contrasting, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we want to understand our dimensions and our measures, right? So you should have a clear set of information, the table information, everything down to our measures, our dimensions. So those are categorical. And then beneath the line, the horizontal line, those are all measures. All right. Notice measures are placed in well, they're placed in a way that you could easily grab them for calculation purposes, but we also have latitude and longitude, which was generated automatically. So you might be wondering, well, how did that happen? At what point did that happen? And the reason it happened, these guys were not in our data set, is Tableau looked at the state and it looked at the postal code and the city, and it said, we have geo-related data, therefore I can create this latitude and longitude, which is a great plus, okay? So it's always a good idea when you bring your data in to look at what Tableau has brought over in the name of, the fields, and also what it generated. Very important. Okay, first thing we're going to do is take region. Okay, again, we're making a sales by region sheet, right? We're going to take region and we're going to drag it onto our shelf, and we're going to plop it right on top of the color. They call it a button or a shelf. Okay. Now we don't see anything other than color representation of our region.
Oh,
right?
I got an error message.
Okay, what does the error message say?
Please add a join clause.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to add a join clause. Okay, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and let's take a look. You must have other data in there.
Oh, it's possible.
Yeah, if you have other data in there, that would cause
I have two tables, Superstore and Superstore.
That would be the problem.
Twice.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, no worries.
Yep. So yeah, you want to go and remove one of those because it's probably saying, oh, I need to recurse back into myself and I'm scared. I've got two Superstores cloned, right?
I got it.
All right, you got it? You able to remove it?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. And actually you raise a very good point. When and if that happens, that's a sign that there is a problem. And typically it'll ask you to do a join, and if it doesn't reference the other table, it's a join to the same table, which is a problem, meaning you've got dupes. Or if you have two tables, right, that are not related, it might say, I'm not sure what to do with this. You need to join it and maybe do a blend or what have you. All right, so right now we just have sales by region. And Andrew, you're okay? You see just the one there?
Yes, that's accurate.
Awesome. Okay. So we have 4 different colors representing 4 different regions. Now, we also want to drag our region attribute, right, under postal code. We want to drag that up to columns, all right, because we're preparing to do a sales by region. So we need to have at least our columns, okay? Now, our sales is under the measures. We want to drag sales up to rows, okay? So you should have region, some sales, right, on rows, and you should have the regions colored based on our moving that region field to the shelf on color, okay? So does everyone have what I have on my screen?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Now it's skinny, right? It's kind of squished, which
Yep.
is a little on the annoying side. So there's a way to fix that, but you have to be careful. What you want to do is move your mouse over to the right side of that chart and just drag maybe 2 inches to the left, to the right. All right, and that's going to make it relax a little. Easy peasy, right? Okay. Now, when you mouse over on each of these columns, you will see that the region that's associated with the column is in the mouse over and the little tooltip that pops up, and the sales. But the sales are not represented as in dollars, right? And they're not represented in, you know, you could do it in thousands or millions or what have you. So let me show you how to fix that. We're going to go up to the rows shelf and we're going to click on the drop down arrow next to sum sales. Okay. And what you want to do is go down to format. Format allows you to change the number. So under the default section, we're going to click on the numbers drop down and we're going to choose currency custom. The reason we're doing custom is in currencies, we want the dollars, right? But custom allows you to change the decimal places. So we're going to take this down to 0 decimal places. And then under display units, we're going to choose thousands. All right. And now when we mouse over, we get thousands. Now, that's a little confusing, right? Because all of these are basically supposed to be millions. You see that there? So ideally, setting it to millions would be better. So let's go back, click on the numbers drop down. Okay, again, I'm in the default section, not in the totals or grand totals. And we're going to choose a display unit of millions. And now when we mouse over, we get flat millions. Now, the other thing we want now is we probably need 2 decimal places because knowing if it's 2.5 million, 2 3/4, what have you. So let's go back and change it to 2 decimal places. And voila, that's exactly what we want. Okay, so there's several different ways to represent the currency that's associated with a given column. You want to think about what is in the best interest of, you know, the client based on what they want, but also what does the data represent? Sometimes a client might want high granularity. So you can change the decimals to 3 places or 4 places. Maybe that has a lot of meaning to the client. You would always want to ask them. Any questions about what we just did? No, yes? Everyone good?
I'm good.
Can you go over that one more time? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. You want to do the whole thing again?
If you don't mind, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Sure, sure. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete sales by region and we'll do it again because it's good practice. All right. So now to delete your sheet, you have to create a new sheet tab. You have to have at least one sheet tab. So I'm going to insert a new worksheet, then right click on sales by region and delete it. That's just one of those things. You can't delete all the sheet tabs. You have to have at least one. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on sheet 2 and rename it to sales by region. All right. And again, you always want to name it so it makes sense so that when you bring it into the dashboard environment, it's logical, right? All right. So the first thing we want to do is, and there's different ways of doing this, different orders. I'm going to change the order based on what I did last time. We're working with region. I'm going to drag region up to columns just to show you that it can be done a multitude of different ways. So our columns are going to be the regions. That's the logic we're using. And our sales, which is down below under the measures, we're going to drag up to the rows shelf. All right. So what I have here is I have 4 different regions represented with the same colors. And you may decide, you know what, visually that doesn't help. So the way that we fix that is we're going to drag a copy of region under tables to the color shelf and just drag and replace. And that's going to take a separate color and apply it to each different region. Okay. The next thing we did is we made this a little wider. So again, we're just hovering over the right side of our chart. And when you get that double arrow that allows you to widen it, we widen it. All right. So good. So far, so good. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. The last thing we want to do is change the number that appears for sales because it is not, you know, dollars. It would be nice to have dollars there. So we're going to right click or left click, my bad, left click on the arrow next to sum sales and go down to format. And that's where the default format is what we're working with. We're going to click on the drop down arrow next to numbers. And we're going to choose currency custom. We're going to leave it at 2 decimal places because we talked about that precision earlier, but we are going to change the display units to millions. Okay. Now, again, you could add, additional decimal places. Let's go with just the 2. And now when we mouse over, we have nice represented, in the millions. Okay. Questions? That one's relatively easy, I would think. So how, I guess
So the scale on the left didn't change from thousands to millions, so.
that's correct, because we didn't ask to change that. Very good, Jerry. So if we wanted to do that, you're going to right click on the y-axis like I have here, go to format, okay? And what do you think you would do next?
Go to numbers and the default section
Okay, and then what?
and currency custom, display unit millions.
Okay, now it's already selected, right?
Yeah,
Ah, so what does that refer to? That's the formatting of some sales from before.
right.
Ah, ha, ha. So we have to do it a little bit differently. Let's close format some sales by clicking on this little X, right? Then right click and go down to format and watch. It does the same thing, right? So it's linked directly to some sales because that's where it's getting its data from.
Right.
Okay. So that being said, what would we need to do to change our axis? What do you think?
Mine says millions.
What's that?
Mine already says millions on that axis.
It does. Okay. So how
Yeah, same
did you,
here.
how
It
did you
happened
get?
automatically.
It happened automatically. I wonder what happened. Jerry and I got robbed.
Oh, you know what it is? I did all this under Axis, not Pain. You're under Pain.
I am under pain. That's correct. Thank you. That is the difference. So you guys get the star. I was waiting for someone to figure that out. So there are 2 tabs here, pain and axis. All right. So
Okay.
that being that, right. So that being said, your axis is going to be associated with scale. Am I right, Jack and Carolina?
Yes.
You got it. So under scale, because that is an axis term, you're going to go down to custom and you're going to change it as you see fit. Now, I'm going to keep the 2 decimal places to make it congruent and then go down to millions. Very good. So case in point.
There.
All right. And now they match, right? Case in point, the interface of Tableau has a lot of really cool goodies. Some things are in tabs, some things are in menus and what have you. So the goal is to think logically, what is it I'm about to do, right? So these sum of sales is tied to the data itself and what we see in the visualization in the design pane area. Anything related to the axis is different. It's going to be axis specific, right? So that's where shading, any of these types of things, the font, how things look. Let's say you wanted the font to be more pronounced, right? You would do it at the axis level, not at the pane level. Okay. All right, so we did a visualization. It's pretty nice, right? We're going to go ahead and save it to Tableau Public. And each time we do one, we're going to save so that if anyone crashes and burns, you'll at least have the latest version and you don't have to recoup. So to save, you're going to do File, Save to Tableau Public. And it's going to ask you to log in if you're not already logged in. You can call this whatever you like. I'm going to call this week 4 class.
We're only doing the Superstore though.
What's that?
We're only going to be doing Superstore data with this.
With this, yeah, with this case study, yeah, this is only
Yes, okay. So
Superstore.
if I call it Superstore,
It
won't
would
be
be
wrong.
congruent with what we're doing, yeah, because we're
Okay.
going to do a second one, which is different. You got it.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So once you do that, you should see it on Tableau Public. And this way, as we make changes and we move forward, right, we are going to have, everything updated and we don't lose anything. Okay. All right.
There it
So
is.
yay, right? Yay. All right, we're going to create a new sheet tab, clicking on the new worksheet down at the bottom. And this one we're going to call sales by department. Right now, you can type out the word department or you can abbreviate. I'm going to abbreviate. I think it looks fine and it's not so wide. And again, that's your call. You can do either, whatever you prefer. All right, so sales by department is going to be very similar to what we just did. We're going to take the sales value or the sales measure, all right, and we're actually going to put it up to columns. So again, be sure you don't double click, single click, take it up to columns. Okay. Now, what it's done is it's taken all the sales and it's placed it on basically a horizontal axis, if you will, and it's representing those sales that it sees, right? Now, is this useful to us? Not really. We need the department to qualify our sales, right? This is just everything in a bucket, and it's really not giving us good information. So what we want to do is drag our department up to the rows shelf. And as soon as we do that, wow, what a big difference. What a huge, huge difference, right? It's more informative. It still has some ways to go, but it actually tells us more information than we had earlier. Now, let's say we wanted the departments to be colored differently, right? Based on department. All we have to do is drag the department dimension over to color. And that'll give us 3 separate colors for each department. Easy, right? Easy peasy. Now, how would we change the dollar values?
What if we wanted to change the color scheme?
If you wanted to change the color scheme, over on the right-hand side, you see your little legend there. That's one way to do it. You can click on the drop-down arrow, click on Edit Colors. Okay, so let's say I did not like the orange for office supplies. I'm going to click on office supplies, select it as the one that I want to change. And let's say I wanted to go to green. I'm going to click on the green color and click apply and click OK.
Okay.
All right, that's how easy it is. Again, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, since it's at the department level, you can come over here to the mark shelf and click on the drop down arrow next to department. Okay, and you can change the colors there as well. Since we've already done it, we'll just keep it as is. So that's one thing we can do. How would we change the dollar values that are on the axis down here? What do you think? Can we format it this way like we did before? Sure, but we have to choose axis, right? Instead of pane, because it's the X axis. So we're going to change our numbers and the scale. We'll do currency. We'll keep 2 decimal places and we'll go with millions, not billions. My goodness, little mouse click problem. And there we have it. Now, is there any benefit from having 2 decimal places based on the data and what we see?
No.
Okay, and there is a problem we see with our visualization all the way down here, right? If let's say it's less than, let's say 0.10 million, we don't have a lot of things here. And if anything, we don't have, we have a scale here, but having that extra 0 after each one of these really doesn't help our situation. So why don't we take that 0 out? Okay, we're going to click on the numbers drop down and change it to 1 decimal place. And that, I think that looks better. I think that looks better. Now, based on our visualization, what can we infer? What insight do we gain just from looking at this?
Technology has the most sales and then furniture.
Yep. Technology is awesome. Office supplies are optional, right? Paper clips, not so much. Hardware, yes, right? So that's basically what we can say. From a business point of view, if you were looking at this, if you had to use this to make a recommendation, what would you say to your client? What do you think?
I wouldn't know what to say yet.
Okay, which is good. I mean, taking a cautious approach is good. At this point, all we can say based on let's assume we haven't analyzed our data, we're just building some visualizations. We can safely say that technology has the highest sales, furniture is second, and office supplies are third, right? And office supplies are considerably different when you're comparing them to technology and furniture. One thing you want to consider,
Yeah, but office supplies are cheaper, so that might actually be a hell of a lot larger in terms of unit sales. or
there
volume.
you go. There
So
you go.
maybe pulling people into the store. So
That's correct. Right. So your first instinct might be, wow, office supplies is doing horribly, right? But you have to think about everything in context.
it's an
Right.
awful lot of paper clips to make up one desk.
Exactly. Or a computer, right?
Yeah.
And the other piece to think about is if you're setting up an office and you have technology, you're going to need furniture, and subsequently you're probably going to need paper at least for your printer, right? So it's a logical add-on, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that the sales volume is lower because the price per unit is a factor. Technology price per unit is always going to be higher than office supplies, as is furniture. So you always want to think in context. At this point, it actually looks representative and normal based on what we know about the three items, the three departments that are selling here, right? So you want to be super careful on that you don't rush to judgment.
You do a pie chart.
We will be doing a pie
No.
chart, Jerry.
Sorry, you know me.
No, I do. So let's do a pie chart. I'm going to move this little guy out of the way here. So now let's say we wanted to have a pie chart. Now, do you want it instead of this one, or do you want to flip this one? We can flip this one. Really easy. We could click on Show Me and click on the pie chart. Oh, look at it. It has no data. It's boring, right?
Mhm.
So how do we fix
small.
this? And small. So the first thing we do to change the size is we use our control and our shift arrow. And notice I have my software tied to that again. See, I wasn't planning on it, but that's okay, Jer. Let me halt my task and kill my short keys program. Not a worry. So Jerry, first of all, what colors do you see in the pie chart, and what observations do you make on that?
Red, blue, and green, but I don't know what they mean. I mean,
Okay.
I would just by having looked at it, I'd say that the red is technology, the blue is furniture, and the green would be office supplies. But
Okay.
looking at
Now,
the chart doesn't tell me anything.
it doesn't tell you anything. What about
Till I
visually
mouse
though?
over it.
What about visually though? Doesn't the green and the blue kind of fight with each other?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I changed my colors. So.
I had a feeling you would. All right. So to make it bigger and to change where it's located, you just hold down Control, use your up arrow and your right arrow to make it bigger. And it's left. You can see here I'm doing a gradual, right? I'm going up, and eventually you don't want to go too far because if you're putting it in a dashboard, we talked about this last week, you don't want it super big, right? So at this point, the colors are off, right? They don't really make sense for us. So to change the colors, very much like we did before, you're going to go all the way over to the right, click on the drop down arrow next to department, and click on your edit colors. And you can go with whatever you like. I'm going to get rid of the office supplies green and make it gold. I think that's going to be a lot more visual, and I just didn't do that. Hold on a minute. My goodness. Office supplies, click, apply, gold. There we go. So that's more visual to me. They don't fight with one another. So was everyone able to change at least the colors so far? Hopefully.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to have some labels. So I'm going to go and clear my format sum sales. I'm going to click on the X here to get rid of that. And I want a label for the department. Seems it would make sense. So I'm going to drag the department attribute over to the label marks, and voila. I get nice labels outside my pie chart. Okay. We still have a problem though. We don't have our values on here. And I think maybe Jerry might not agree. It would be nice to have the dollar values in each slice. What do you think?
Why not?
Why not, right? So I'm going to take sales and I'm going to drag it over to, is it labels? Or
Yes.
is it, there you go. Now that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is dragging it up to detail. All right, and let me show you the difference. So if I make it detail, it's actually not going to show up because it's already there. So let me get rid of it. Let me get rid of it and bring it back. Now, how do I change the dollars so that it looks representative like the other chart?
I don't see it when I drag it to detail.
You don't see it because it's already applied to the label. It's already applied to the label. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
But I have now 1, 2, 3. You have 4. Yeah, I have 4.
Yeah. So if I were to remove all of these sales, right? Let's get
Right.
rid of them. Ooh, all of them. All we have is our colors for our department and our text values for our departments, right?
Right.
Now, if I want to take sales and put it in detail, I can do that, but guess what? It's not going to do that until I change it to a column. All right.
Okay.
Now, that being said, when I do that and I flip this to an attribute, let me change it back to a measure because it's actually sum. That's what happens.
Mhm.
So there are limits as to what you can do, and you want to be super careful. So I'm going to drag this off the shelf.
It happened to me too, and it's ugly.
It is ugly. It is not representative of what we want, right? Not representative. All right. So now we want sales to be associated with our chart. So let's drag it up to our label and put it there. But how do I change it so that the values for each thing are formatted using the format that we like? What do you think? It's very easy. And again, it's not in anywhere, there's no access or anything. What you do is you're going to come over to the drop down arrow next to sales, some sales. And
Format.
right here, we're able to do our format. So depending on contextually what you're doing, that's where you're going to have the option to change the format.
Access or pane?
That's a good question. Is it access or pane? Would you say these labels are access specific? And does a pie chart have an axis?
Right.
All right, let's go to axis. Inquiring minds want to know, right? Inquiring minds want to know.
There's nothing there to let me do it. Okay.
There's nothing there to let me do it, right? It's already been done actually. And you see it's not applied here.
Says numbers 0.01 million.
Right. So in this case, if I go to pane, go to numbers, custom, right? Go to currency. I have 2 decimal places. I don't want 2 decimal places. I want just 1. And I'm going to change my display units to million. And voila. So in this case, it's backwards. It's the opposite of what we did before. This axis is tied to the prior chart we had. All right. And so this is not considered an axis because a pie chart does not have an axis. So this is one of those weird chart styles that just doesn't have it. So what we would have to use is pane to change it. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. So to get rid of this format sum sales, this little X right up here, you can just click on him and you go back to your tables and your fields. All right, so we did another chart. We made it a pie chart. What we're going to do now is we are going to file, save to Tableau Public. Just way if we crash and burn, we won't lose everything. And again, you want to replace it. Okay. Now again, it should look something like this with 2 tabs. right? And of course, each tab should allow you to mouse over, and so on and so forth. And for the purposes of discussion, you probably know, but on the legend, you can click on one to kind of wash out the others. Let's say you were presenting to someone and you wanted to just focus on office supplies, and maybe related to our conversation earlier that office supplies are not very, large, if you will, relative to the other, but they are necessary for these two other pieces of the pie. Okay. Then you might focus on technology and then furniture. And then if you click again, all of them come back.
Question.
Yeah.
When I uploaded it, the only thing that I see is the one pie chart. I did save to overwrite it.
Okay. So you don't have another sheet tab here?
No, I don't.
Okay. So to change that, you're going to click on the gear, and you want to make sure Viz Sheets are as tabs is highlighted as turned on.
Hold on a second.
That's all right. So the little gear is on the right underneath the magnifier glass.
Okay.
You see it there?
Let me sign back. Let me sign in and check this out. Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to actually
Wow.
do it online.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to do it. Okay. There. Very strange. I have. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have to open up the Biz Sheets. Okay, got it. And
Yep.
then go here, show sheets. Ah, there we go. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep. And in some cases, you may not want to see all the tabs for whatever reason. Maybe you turn them off because, I don't know. It's either not relevant to your talk with a particular individual, or you don't want them going from tab to tab, but you can turn them on and so on. All right. So, all right. Awesome. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is we are going to create a new sheet tab. All right. By clicking on the sheet tab item, if you will, down at the bottom. We're going to call this sales by department and region, DEPT. I'm going to abbreviate here because it's too long, right? So sales by department and region. Okay. Now for this one, you want to, again, think about it. The more items you bring into a chart, it's about communicating information and being able to gain insight. So anything you do in visualization is going to be for your client and what they want to convey, or what they've asked you as the analyst to help highlight or enlighten them as to what's going on with my business. So you're part artist and you're part, you're trying to think about your client and their perspective when you're doing this. Okay, that's the first thing. So since this is about our departmental sales, first thing we're going to do obviously is bring up department, and we're going to put it in the rows, because basically each department has sales and each department is associated with a region. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is bring up sales to columns. And this is pretty much what we had earlier before we flipped it to a pie chart. It's basically, it's vanilla. We don't have special colors. So why don't we take our department and drag it over to color so that we at least differentiate each department based on color, very similar to what we did before. And with one really easy click of the mouse, we can actually add additional information to this. But before we do that, we want to change our axis, right? So here we have an axis with the great numbers that we've been working with. So we're going to right click, go to format. And what do? We go over to axis, right? And let's just change our scale so that it is congruent with the others, because if we don't, it could be confusing. We're going to take it down to 1 decimal place, and the units is going to be millions. All right, that's our first thing we need to do. All right, once you've done that, to get rid of this pane here that we've opened up, you just click on the X right here to close it out. And we want our region to represent regional sales, right? So here we're going to drag region and lay it right in front of department in the rows shelf.
Mm.
And by doing that, we've added a significant amount of insight to our visualization with one click. All right. So by looking at this, what insight do you gain from seeing this change here? What jumps out at you? I see a
there's-
couple of outliers here.
Well, the sales are not the type of sales. It's hard because there's so many freaking
It's-
lines, but furniture in South, for instance, is the largest, not the largest. Technology is furniture. It's furniture. Okay, so it's always furniture, office supply. Technology is not always. Furniture looks like it's the largest in all of them. Okay, that's what I'm looking.
Well, actually,
The relationships are pretty much the same between the three products.
Go ahead, Carolina. I hear.
there's an outlier like on the actually, so technology is highest for the majority of the regions, but for East,
Mhm.
East Ag, that furniture is more.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay, that's what I was looking for.
The East loves their furniture. What's going on here, right? So if we
Mhm.
trace this blue line, assuming you didn't change it to another color, but if we trace this furniture in East is an outlier. This is, and that would be, again, a question to, talk to your client about. It seems that, there's a lot of sales related to the East. There's also a big difference between office supplies between the East and the South, and a vast gap, a secondary gap between the East office supplies and West, and then of course the third. So you can see that the East trends very high in actually all three, right? All three areas, except what? Is the East on top, would you say?
Well, in sales by region it was.
Well, they're on top for all of them.
All of them. Yes. Yes. So right now we can say that the East is producing the largest amount of sales. Who's doing the worst?
West.
The West. Okay. And so the West, what we're basically talking now, think about the geographic locations, right? You've got West and East. What do we know about those geographic locations?
I don't know. I'd argue that the South is the worst.
South is doing the worst. Yeah.
South is doing the worst. Okay.
Oh,
All right.
you're right. Actually, it is.
Yes. Okay. All right. So South is doing the worst. So let's flip it then. What do we know about the South and the East? How are they different from
Well, from the crime data that we looked at before, the South appears to be a not as upscale a neighborhood.
Well, the crime data what we looked at was from California, though, Jerry.
Isn't this California? Or this Los Angeles?
No.
Are we not looking at? Am I confused on the data source? This is a superstore.
Irving, Oxford. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is all over.
Okay, so I think that, we have, as far as the East goes, there's a lot of, I'm not sure if there's like more companies in the South, but there is, a lot of there's a lot of big companies, startups in the West and the East versus the South.
Right. You've got New York City, and you've got the West, California, and tech is out there very heavily.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So
these are national stores.
these are national. Yes. So if you're not sure, right, at this juncture, easiest way would be to click on data source at the lower left and go back and look at your city. And what else could we look at?
Does it have a state?
We have postal code. We have, hold on here. Yes, state. And if you could see here, there's Texas, Massachusetts, New York, Washington.
It's
This
so
is
hard to drag
the-
this thing.
this is the United States. So this
Yeah.
is all over the globe, or all over the nation,
All over the
Okay.
map. You got it.
all over the map, right? So that being said, given that this is a representation of the entire United States, we can look at this and make inferences as to, is this normal, is this reasonable, or is it not? Okay. Does that make sense? All right, what we're going to do now, because this is really good information, we're going to duplicate this sheet. All right, and the way you duplicate it, we're going to right click on the sheet tab, sales by department and region, and click on duplicate. Okay, we're just going to clone it. Now, what we're going to do is change, it's going to be sales by department and region, but we're going to add to the end the word stacked. Okay, so visually, this is kind of difficult to look at. You know, there's a lot of color competition. There's lines going across that sometimes play tricks on us with our eyes and what have you, right? So what we're going to do is remove region from the rows shelf just by dragging it off. Okay, just to kind of clean it up a little, right? And let's try something. Let's take region and place it on our color shelf. Blah.
Oh, that's cool.
That is a stacked bar chart. Now, what's kind of cool visually, it competes less with the eyes. You can see that the colors are now vertical in nature, and visually it's easier to see. So how is this different? How does this communicate to you differently?
You can't tell which region it is. You'd have to label it.
So it is labeled. It has a
Well, it's
legend.
color coded,
But there's a
there is
legend on-
legend. Yeah,
Right.
You have to constantly look back and forth.
Right. So that's a facet. One other thing is if you mouse over, it tells you the region, right? It tells you each of those things, right? If we were to put the name of the region in the colored bar, that more than likely would not help us.
Well,
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, that's okay. That's all right.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, generally speaking, when you build a graph like this on Excel, you are gonna have a legend. It's not gonna be.
Right.
You
We
would have
do.
stacked, but I do like the fact that it kind of groups together the what does it group together? What I'm trying to see was, well, yeah, I mean, I guess it keeps the colors together, and if on the top, if you were to sort it, it makes it even easier to see those the differences in cells.
Right. So when you say sorted, describe what you mean. You mean to select one and filter?
Sorry, just on top of I guess the graph area,
Mm-hmm.
can click on what did I did it earlier and now it kept it. Oh yeah, on department,
Mm-hmm.
the down.
Arrow.
Yeah. Oh,
And
okay. I don't. So whenever we did the bar chart, I was able to sort it. So like on the very top,
yes.
it has
Yes.
the highest.
You
Yeah.
can sort it alphabetically. Yep, absolutely. So you could click on alphabetically and it'll do it, which is fine. In this case, I don't think alphabetically would really help you. In
I
my
have
opinion,
one myself, so I have like technology up top and
Yep,
then second.
and I do too, right? So here I'm sorting it, right? I'm sorting alpha and descending. I'm going back and forth between them. It kind of helps in a
Well,
way.
Different.
Pardon?
My bars look different, like the sizing of them.
Well, I actually brought my chart in and made it more slender. So I went to the right side of my chart and
Yeah.
I drug it in to kind of visually so that it's more compressed. I don't know. All right. That's what I had done. The other thing you can do is you can actually change the colors if you feel it's we did colors before. So this chart is not designed to really have in the bars themselves either the name of the region or what have you. It probably would not help. And I think the legend is probably the thing that is going to be the best when it comes to representing this data. What are your thoughts? I'm going to show you a trick in a second.
Can you make the bars thicker?
Oh,
Yes. So if you go to the left-hand side of your graph and you hover over the department name, you can click and drag down.
Cynthia.
Yes.
So I found it actually. So on the axis where it says cells at the bottom,
Cells.
under
Oh,
one point,
okay.
that's what I have clicked on mine.
Oh yeah. So you can actually, you can,
Okay, yeah, sorry. That's what I
that's
meant.
okay. Yep.
I
So
made it more
you,
complicated.
right. You can sort by sales or by department. Absolutely. Right. Just by clicking on this and, sorting it back and forth. You do the same for department. Okay. Alphabetic, right? And you can just click, and each time you click the little graph there, it will sort. But making the bars taller makes a big difference. What do you think?
Yeah, it
Could you
does.
How did
do that
you do
again?
that?
Because I
Yeah.
tried to do it and it wouldn't work.
Okay, so here's how I did it. I just went over to the departments area over here. And as soon as I go between two departments, you see how I get the arrow that points up and down,
Oh, okay.
and click and drag down. And that's going to
Yeah, it's
basically
kinda
make it
tricky.
like row height, like in Excel when you do row height.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That
That's
makes it a lot easier to understand.
And a lot easier to read. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So you can also, format it and make it prettier. At this point, it's looking good. Why don't we go ahead and save it? Just save to Tableau Public, just to make sure we don't lose it. Replace what you did earlier.
Do we keep the first sales by region? Yeah, why not?
We're keeping the whole file. I'm not sure what you mean.
We have sales by region, we have sales by department or region, and we have stacked. We're keeping them both.
That's correct. That's correct. So we should have 1, 2, 3. We should have 4 sheets.
Yeah.
Yep. So now the only other change I would make to this is the red and the orange compete with each other. So I'm going to swap out one of these colors, and I think I'm going to go with the red. I just realized that that's really horrible. So let's go with, instead of red, let's go with gold. Boop. And it's a little bit better. A little bit better. Maybe I'll change out the orange too. All right, orange, you're going to leave. You are going to be pink. All right, a little bit easier to read. Okay. Any questions about that? Now, you could use browns and things like that. Browns are hard for people to read. You have to go with what works. You could also create a custom palette, and you could, make it whatever colors, maybe tailored to the organization's preferences and what have you. Okay. All right. The next sheet we're going to make, we're going to click the new sheet
Oh,
tab.
boy, I have nice pastels now.
Excellent. Excellent. It's festive.
Oh, they're not powerful.
All right,
Not
the next
dramatic.
sheet tab we're going to do, we're going to bring up a new sheet tab. We're going to call this annual sales over time. All right. Again, we're using the same data. We're just visually representing it different ways, which again is helpful for a variety of different goals. So annual sales over time is useful because we can now add in the temporal plane to it, which is important. All right. We are going to drag sales up to rows, and we're going to get a large bar chart, a 1 bar, really not helpful, but we're starting. All right. This is basically the sum of all sales over time, and yay, it doesn't really do much for us. Now, in order to make this about a series of time or sales over time, as we started out, we need a date. So we're going to take our order date and we're going to drag it up to the columns area. And we're going to get sort of a trend, but a very skinny chart, which unfortunately doesn't do much for us. It's kind of compressed. So we're going to go to the right-hand side of the chart itself. And when we get the double arrow, we're going to stretch it out, maybe like so. Okay. Now, based on what we just did, what insights can we state we see here?
They're doing well. I mean, they're getting better.
They're getting better. Okay, sales are increasing over time. It's actually a classic progression, right? First couple years might be a little flat, if you will, and then it increases, and then gradually gets better.
Got better during the pandemic.
Well,
All those
and
technology people were remote working.
yeah, well, and
Okay.
perhaps office supplies increased too because everybody was buying sanitizer, hand sanitizer, right?
Mhm.
And people working from the home, right? They need desks, they need technology, they need all those good things. All right, so we introduced a date. We've got our date values. Now, we widened our chart area because it helps us see it, the trend as it's unfolding. Now, what else could we do? Well, since Tableau understands what a date can do, it brings it in first as year. Okay, so this is giving us a year-on-year type of insight. Okay, and so it's great to have year. That's something that's really important. However, we may want to see it in a different way. Now, what we're going to do is in this same chart, look at it in different perspectives. So we're going to go up to year in the column shelf, click on the drop down arrow. And what we're going to do is not click on quarter in the first slot, but in the second slot. So where it says Q2, blah, 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 we're going to click on that one. That gives us the quarter relative to the year. So that gives us for each year and each quarter, this is what the sales look like. Okay. So what are your thoughts? What kind of insight do we get now from this?
Roller coaster.
Yeah. I would say.
General trend is up, but a lot of ups and downs.
2018 and 2019 for Q1 have that same like dip.
Okay. I'm only seeing Q2 and Q4. I don't see Q1. Might spread too wide or something, or
Possibly. You should see all four
No,
quarters.
I get the same thing, Jerry. It's like you can only hover over it because my screen's not that wide. It's not as wide as Dr.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
wide screen.
Therefore, it compresses it or hides what it can't,
right.
you know.
Okay.
But like
Okay.
if I hover over that first point, it'll say 2017 Q1.
Right. So if you
Right.
made your screen wider before, you might want to make it not as wide, like your chart, right? That might be something to think about. Yeah.
Didn't work. I'm still seeing on the legend. I'm seeing Q4, Q2, Q4.
Yeah. And mine's so wide, I don't see a legend.
Well, I mean, not a legend down at the bottom. The x-axis along the bottom.
Okay. So you are seeing Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4?
No, all I have is Q2, Q4, Q2.
I have the same thing, Jerry. It's because
It's
of the
just the way it
screen
is. Okay. Okay.
All right. So one thing we do see is in Q1 for the first 2 years, the sales are really low, right? Now, let's just assume we just started tracking this data, or maybe the business just started up. There's a lot of inferences we can make about Q1 because Q1 is the beginning of the year post-holiday, right? Then all of a sudden in 2020, what happened? A pandemic, amongst other things, right? But we see that it increased in 2020, right? And we took a little bit of a dip in the second quarter, but then from quarter 3 on, we did really well. Okay, so this is a quarterly trend year on year. So
all those peaks are Q4 though.
All of those peaks are Q4. Good,
right?
Exactly. So if we look at this, Q4 is peak heavy. What do you think is driving that? Given what we know, back to school. What else? How about you get a new computer for the holidays? Now that we're doing this, in office
shopping.
thing, right? And maybe people are saying, hey, I want my home office to be decked out, for the holidays. Would you get me a new office desk and chair and all
People
those
come
fun
back
things?
from summer vacation and start working again.
Yep. Carolina, were you going to say something?
Yeah, we're talking about Q4, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was just think this is such a sales perspective, but I was just kind of thinking like, well, a lot of companies, the year starts in January and they'll mark down things to get sales in.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a very good point. That could be one thing that's driving this. The goal, if you have inventory, is to deplete your inventory at the end of the year, right? You don't want to be carrying inventory into the new year from a tax perspective. So you want to, liquidate. You're going to offer those sales. Given it's the holidays, it lends itself to, having a really good third or fourth quarter rather, and then entering the new year kind of slow and then ramping back up again. The other thing to think about, so considering 2020, right? In the beginning of the year, Q1, inventories were low, right? So that could have an impact on whether or not we could have had higher sales for Q1. People were having trouble, with shipping and logistics and what have you. So those are things that might be driving this as well. But 2020 Q4 is the highest ever. What do you think is driving that?
2020 Q4, the pandemic?
Would be. What else do you think might be driving that? I mean, it was election year. That's one thing. The vaccine had started to come out, right? That's another thing. So we're seeing sales. The economy was recovering here, right? People were feeling, more confident about where things were going and getting used to the idea that the vaccines are here now. We're going to start rolling them out. Hopefully there was talk of the vaccine, right? So people were getting, hopeful, which is a good thing. And then of course, in 2021, a lot of things have changed, gone up and down. People are going back to school and afraid and what have you. So who knows what the data will look like this year, right? All right. Is there anything else that you can see on here that adds to your insight?
Well, I have a question, Cynthia.
Yeah.
So I feel like the pandemic has totally blanked out the years for many of us. Like I can't even think what that was like. What Q4 2020, but Q4 2020, you're saying. I guess in my head I was just kind of thinking that there was a lot of purchases made because. Yeah, like maybe going back to school, but you mentioned something that you said that people were getting a little more hopeful. So are you saying kind of like from an economic perspective, because people will like, I forget what to call it, but basically like the behavior of buyers during certain situations in the world. So you're saying that maybe people started feeling more comfortable and confident, therefore it boosted sales because now they're like buying things.
Yes. Yes. So typically you'll see a trend during a change in, political election year. You'll see differences in consumer behavior. Obviously a pandemic will also drive that as well. But if there's an anticipation that things are going to improve or there's going to be a significant change and people are hopeful, they tend to purchase more. Conversely, if they're, afraid that I'm going to lose my job, maybe some existential threat where, I don't feel like, the economy is very strong. I don't want to celebrate the holidays because I'm depressed, right? Then you might see sales go down. Yes, Jack.
I would probably want to have a stacked version of this to overlay year over year and see where the gaps are.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead and create that? And we're actually going to we're going to create a new sheet. Now, Jack, we have a sales by department and region stacked, right? But what we don't have is year, right? So what we're going to do, and Jack raises a good point, we're going to copy or duplicate our sales by department and region stacked. All right. And when we duplicate that, it's going to go probably to the right of that one. And why don't we just rename it? Let's do sales over time. Okay. We're going to call it sales over time. Now, in order to make it stacked related to year, and do you still want department in there, Jack? Or do you want to take that out?
I would take it out for now.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, so we're going to drag department off of the shelf. All right, we're going to move sum of sales down to rows. Okay, and then what we need is a temporal aspect in our columns. So we're going to grab order date and drag that up to columns. Okay, and we're going to widen our chart. And what are your thoughts?
So hard to widen these columns. Where's the arrow to grab? There we go.
Yeah, you have to mouse over until it's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, pull that one.
Let me see.
You like it? You can also do clicking on show me. I tend to like this view myself. You do show me and you choose the, it's the second one down. It looks like a horizontal bar chart. That's one way. The second one over from that, it's one step in is a stacked bar chart. So there's two bar chart flavors that you might find are useful. I think you were going for a stacked bar chart, Jack.
No, actually, I was going to go for a stacked, well, what you had before, but stacked originally.
Okay, so a line chart
Just
stacked.
to see what it looks like.
Right, so a line chart stacked. This is basically a stacked line chart. So this guy right here is, because it's a line, it's going to be, you know,
Actually, it would be the one third from the bottom, or even one of those two. I would have tried.
This one?
No, the one down below.
That one.
Right there. Yeah.
Okay. That's one way of viewing it. And what's nice about it is it keeps everything, there's no white space between it. So you kind of see the ribbon effect.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are your thoughts? I think I like this, Jack. I think it is representative. One thing that we really can see is that the West is flat, right? From year to year, year on year.
Yeah.
Because you've
This
got
helps
that.
you with breaking it down by region.
Absolutely, absolutely. So year on year, right? In the West region, we're flat. And then when you compare South, it's not as flat, but it is pretty much flat. I mean,
It
trend
doesn't have the volatility of the other chart, though.
Okay, when you say it doesn't have the volatility of the other chart,
The
what do
ups
you
and
mean?
downs. The annual sales over time goes like a roller coaster. This is more like, you know, a general slope.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Is it showing the same information?
No.
So if I looked at annual sales over time,
Oh,
I
it's
was
not
looking
looking
at
at
it from
quarterly.
a quarter. You got it. This one is looking at year.
Year, okay.
So now let's flip it
So
to
it
quarter.
smooths out over the year.
Right. So let's look at it from the quarter perspective. Remember to choose the second quarter, not the first one. There you go. There's our colorful mountains, right?
Yeah.
So now this actually matches that trend, that that quarterly trend.
I'm sorry. How did you get to that point? I lost track of something while I was trying to.
That's okay. So what I did is I went up to the columns shelf and I clicked on the arrow next to year for order date, and I chose quarter under the second section. We want quarter within the year, so I chose this one.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, that's all I had to do. All right,
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. So this I think is it shows our trends from quarter to quarter, right? The other one was year on year. So
Yeah, that
basically,
one. The other one was two-dimensional, whereas this adds a little bit more dimension to it.
it does, and it's just we changed the temporal aspect. We changed it to a quarterly rather than you know, a year on year, right? So this one is sales over time. This tab here, we should probably call it sales over time, but maybe sales by quarter, right? So I'm going to change the sheet tab so it's called sales by quarter. Whoops, quarter, and I'm going to do YOY, meaning year on year. Okay. Or year over year. This gives us, this tells us this is, the year is the top part hierarchically, then the quarter. So year and quarter. Here, this is over time, but it's just one plain line chart. It doesn't really give us as much information as this one. This one is a lot more visual. What's some other things we see from this chart? Anything, now that we've changed the dynamics of it? (2019) Q4. What do you see?
Got a peak.
And
all
every
four stores,
region,
yeah.
every region, right? Now what's really interesting, I like this.
No,
Each
fact-
other.
some regions,
2017,
two regions,
2017.
one was flat, one's down, two are up. But
right, but if you
I'm
look,
sorry, 2019 quarter four, excuse me.
yeah, so if you look at the peak, it's symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you look at the dynamic of the peak, it's symmetrical. Okay,
Except
It's-
2017 Q3, it's off.
I'm not looking at that one. I'm looking.
Okay.
I had said, what do we see with 2019 Q4? So I've
Right.
isolated it temporally to year and quarter,
Mhm.
right? And what I see here is symmetry.
Yep.
So what that means is regardless of region, in a scalar way, sales trended the same. And I would wonder what drove that. Did we implement something different, from a store point of view? It's very unusual for all four regions to trend the same relative to each other, right?
Actually, looking at this chart, I say the unusual one is Q3 2017. Because otherwise, after that, they are all pretty much trending the same.
Yeah, this one trends this way and these two go that way,
Right.
right? These guys all go this
Pretty much
way.
go with each other. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe
I-
they unified their marketing.
Right, their approach,
their
absolutely.
Marketing approach.
Absolutely. That's a good way of looking at it. So when you start seeing it, look for symmetry within each of these peaks and valleys. Look for symmetry. In the valley, if I focus on the distance between 2018 Q1 and 2018 Q2, same thing, symmetrical changes here,
Mhm.
right? So when you see consistency over time, you have to ask yourself, what is each region doing the same, and are they doing anything different? If we see a weird trend that one goes one way, one goes the other way, what was different? What do we know about the differences? So that whole idea of a gap analysis, it's really
Yeah.
important.
So I
This is also going to help them with their purchasing.
Yes. Go ahead, Carolina.
may have missed this. So the whenever you hover, so say like on Q, yeah, those two black points.
Mhm.
Why are there two black dots?
So let's focus on that. Let's focus on the bottom black dot. When I hover over it, says sales 0.3 million, right? And if I go up to the top black dot, it says east, right? So east, help me, Lord, east and east. So what's the difference between the labels? Do you see any difference between the label?
I'm trying to find it. Let me see, east.
So we have 0.3 million and we go to the top, we have 0.2 million.
Million.
It's two different regions, right?
Yeah,
So
and
the bottom dot, right, the bottom dot is where the region starts. Okay, and the top dot is where the next region starts. You see? So this dot is for the pink, which is the east. And all of this is east. As soon as I hit that dot, that's the next region. It's like a waypoint.
okay, so what's the purpose of it? I mean, if I'm able to hover and see the amounts, the cells, what's the what do you think the purpose?
It's just a marker. It's just a visual marker. Yep. It's just a visual marker. It might help people, see, whoops, let me undo that. I shouldn't click and drag at the same time here. Come on now. Okay. I want my chart back. It might help people see, but you can also use this to identify and click and identify one specific area. So if I click on that top dot, I have now filtered it to just central.
Okay.
Right. If I click it again, I bring it all back. So there's several different purposes. One is to show where one region ends, one section ends and the other, but you can also identify a region as well. I find it's easier just to click on the color to identify the region and wash out the rest. Yep.
Okay, it made me think. I was for a moment. I was like, "Is this? You don't have like box plots? Have
Yep.
the? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, "Is that
Yep.
supposed to form?" Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Now, another thing you can do is you can drag on those little dots as well. And when you do that, you're able to say, okay, I want both of these regions. So if you drag at the starting point and go up to the next dot, you're including two. So it's a multi-selector as well. And then of course I can click and drag and go to the next one, or I can click and drag and go to the top three. So you notice when I click and drag, right? As soon as I go and I drag, it knows what to include. You see? And again, it takes some practice. Okay, but you're lining up each dot and you're basically saying include this. It's like a snap to line. So you're saying bring this in, bring this in, bring this in. Or conversely, get rid of this. So I could go like that and identify those two. So if I go from here to here, I'm going from start to where the next point starts. So I've identified the top. Let me bring them all back. Come on now. All right. So if I start here, whoops, and not click. All right. If I start here and I drag down to the next one, I will include both of them. You see, if I go like this, I will grab the next one. So I started at the start of the third line, you see. So it's just a way of identifying different regions, sort of a multi-select. And then of course the legend, you can do one at a time, which is kind of cool. All right. So I think this style chart works better than, let's say, this. What do you think? Not that this isn't useful. Pardon?
Question though, on the stack chart.
Yes, this guy or this
Yeah.
guy?
No,
This guy.
no, the overtime. Let's say the top is what? Is central?
The top is central.
Let's say somewhere along the line, there was a tornado in the in the area, and it ripped apart the store and they were closed for a whole quarter before they can get back open. How would that show on the chart? Because it would just like disappear, it would be down to zero.
So if there was no sales whatsoever, then for that temporal space, you would not see that region. You would not see that region, right?
But what if they just flipped? What if all of a sudden central went down and east went up? Are these just as a percentage of cumulative of total sales?
These are sum of sales. These are, in other words, within a given quarter, month, year, we're just summing up the sales.
All sales for the chain then.
That's correct. So if you go back to your data source, right? And everything's at the order level. So literally we're looking at revenue, right? We've got quantity in there, right? We've got our total sales here, right? So we're looking at total revenue in the chain. You got it.
Okay.
Okay. So something to think about is visually, how should I display my data visually in a visual way where it's going to effectively communicate these trends. When it comes to time, obviously time is an important aspect, but what do we want to show to the client is really, really important, because you want them to be able to understand what they're seeing, but at the same time be able to pick up on those trends that go up, down, cases where it's flat, or cases where it picked up and or it's symmetrical, right?
Could you show something like percentage of sales for the entire chain by region?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, what I would do is I would caution doing too much on one particular chart.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you want to think about visually when I start adding things, is that helpful or not? right? So if I were to take sum of sales or sales and drag it over to, let's say, the label, right? That's a lot of information.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all.
That's a lot of information. And
Even
it's
if you turn it into a percentage.
exactly, it's very granular, right?
Right.
Because remember, it's representing it at the store level
Right.
when you do that. So you just want to think about what is the best way to bring in that information, right?
Excuse me. Could you turn that into a percentage rather than a, or is that, what are we looking at? Format
Absolutely,
development.
absolutely. So let's say you did sum of sales, you clicked on it in the marks shelf, and we went down to our measure and we did a percentile. We could do that,
Okay.
right? Or there's another way to do percentage, right? Percent of total.
Right.
So do you remember where we did that?
Was an analysis
And percentage of,
total of row
now is it going to be the row?
or the column? No,
What do you think?
no, it has to be column.
Are you sure?
Well, they're not adding up to 100%.
Did you add them up real quick, Jer?
I'm just looking the way they're stacked,
All right, so if you do it by column,
but I don't know what I'm looking at. Forget about it. It's
well, no,
not
no.
doing-
If
not
you do
doing
it by
anything.
column,
It
okay,
does
but if-
31%, you have 15 or 23. Yeah, now it's adding up.
now
to,
it's adding up. Now, let me ask you a question though.
but we lost the feeling for the
We
trend.
lost the feeling. Now we've got so much going on, and that's because you brought in a different dimension, a different measure, but it's now colliding with the dimension, right? So it's not beneficial. So the easy way to get rid of it is simply to drag sum of sales off of there, whoop, and get rid of it.
I'm
Now,
just choking on my water, and also the column on the left, the y-axis is now percentage. It's not dollars.
that's correct. So you're going to fix that. How are you going to fix it?
I'm going to get rid of it.
Okay, and how are you going
Whatever
to
we
get?
just did, I'm going to get Control Z and we're done.
Good job, Jer. Yes, so Control Z is a beautiful thing. Yeah, I would agree that too many numbers on there is not beneficial. And when you add a dynamic that is compounding, right, it may not be beneficial to the viewer. So you want to be careful on that. All right, so we have our, let's recoup. We have sales by region at the very left where we started, sales by department and region, right? We have sales by department and region stacked. We have sales over time, and we have annual sales over time. So let's go ahead and save our sheet up to Tableau, and we'll just replace what's there. All right. And why don't we go ahead, you want to view it online, make sure everything looks good. I think everything looks good. Let's just verify. Sales by department. Okay, sales by region. Stacked. Looks good. Sales over time. Right. And then, of course, annual sales over time. All right. Everything looks good. Let me drag this out of the way. My goodness gracious. Oh, let's grab this screen here. All right. Okay, so now that we've done this, why don't we take a quick break? Because I know you guys might, I know I need to grab some tea or something. My throat is a little sore. It's Jerry's fault because he's choking on water. Yeah, Jerry, it's your fault. Why don't we take a quick break, and when we get back, we will continue making a few more charts, and then we're going to go into GeoJSON territory. Okay. I will see you guys shortly. Yes, Vino Verde, yes. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so this is where we left. we had annual sales over time. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a sales by category over time worksheet. So in a very similar trend to what we did prior, we're going to create a new worksheet, and we're going to call this sales by category. And over time, of course, tells us that there's a temporal plane associated. So sales by category over time. And since we're focusing on time and we're focusing on sales, and in this case, we are also interested in region, we're going to bring those three things up. Region is going to be up into our, into our colors shelf. It's a weird thing calling it a shelf, but that's what they call it. So we're dragging region up to our colors shelf under the marks area. Okay. We have 4 little dots. Aren't they cute? They don't do much for us yet, but they will. Next thing we're going to focus on is sales. We're going to bring sales up 2 rows. And now we get another interesting dynamic going on here. And we need a temporal plane because our goal is to look at it over time. So we're going to bring order date up, or I'm sorry, order date. Yes, order date up 2 columns. And now we get this lovely line chart that we started with before. I'm going to make my chart wider like I did before. So again, you're just mousing over to the right-hand side and then stretching it out to make it larger. Okay, and really this is the same chart we just built. We just, brought in those dynamics. Now, the goal is to focus on category. So I'm going to go and select category and set the top of my dimensions list. And when we use category, we want to think about, what do we want to see? We want to see sales by category, by year, by region, right? So category is going to go right in front of sales at the row level. Okay. And when we do that, this is an interesting way of viewing things. We have our category of product on the left. Okay. We have our sales amount, right? And then we have within our year dynamic, right? If I scroll down here, everything is by year. Okay. And obviously we have a lot of categories, so we would want to scroll through to see them all. And that's pretty much what we have here. Anyone stuck or need help? Yes, no, maybe. So one thing I would want to do, because this is a little small, is I would want to make the left side where the sales are, I would want to make that a little wider by just, again, clicking on the vertical line, right, that you see here. And once you get that double arrow, just clicking and dragging, that kind of separates the sales and the product and what have you. The category should also be changed because everything seems to be wrapping and some of the words are not visible and what have you. That's also very helpful. Okay. Now we're going to have a scroll bar. That's without saying because we have a lot of categories. And so, it's a trade-off. We have to do what we need, but having a scroll bar makes it kind of useful. Right. So what insights do we gain here? Or what are your thoughts of the visual aspect of this? We'll focus on that first. Anybody?
Everything looks pretty flat,
Okay.
except when you get down to tables and
Okay.
telephones and communications.
Labels are really
Yeah.
now let's focus on labels. Remember you would ask, what if we don't have sales for a given,
Right.
right?
There's
That's basic
something labels. Yeah. This
labels, right? So
Central
he-
sold them and nobody else did.
exactly. So there's a
East, it says,
case.
East, not Central.
Yes. Well, it actually, for me, it's
South. No, they're there.
they're there, but it's negligible, right?
Would it be safe to say that some categories you can't go by the numerical count. You can't go by the tens of thousands. Some of them you'd have to
Make
just
smaller.
yeah, you'd have to make some smaller because they just don't scale properly against something that are big
Ah.
ticket items.
That's a good one. So that's one thing we're going to add to our list. What's another thing? What else do you see here that might be visually challenging? So one thing I'm alluding to
There's
is
just too many. There's too many.
too many dynamics. Like region compounds it big time. Region adds that extra layer that perhaps is not beneficial, right? So let's try something. We're going to take region out of the shelf here. Just drag it away from the shelf. And now we have sales by category, by year. What do you think of this? Is this better?
You're still going to need to know regions, so maybe you would have it where each you would have, like, for instance, how do I explain this? It would be broken down at the column level by region.
Okay, so let's experiment. So if I were to drag region up to the columns, okay, and obviously we want the region to be colored differently, right? And then take region and lay it on top of color. How does that work?
It's a little bit more legible.
Yeah. This is very much like spark lines. If you've ever worked with spark lines, it's color visualization. So this is actually easier than the line chart to perceive the differences in region. And in some cases, it's really visible. So for example, bookcase sales, right? In 2019, in the West region was pretty high relative to the other, right? That's easy to visually see that, to perceive that.
And now you could see things that might not be like for instance, labels are not going to be as, you're still going to have the situation with labels
the
and
scale,
envelopes,
right?
because they're just, unit cost is just very small.
That's correct.
So you have to compensate for that some way when you're trying to understand, you know, how to look at the numbers.
Absolutely. So one thing that we recognize is that the scale of over here is problematic, right? So we would need to look at that. Let's look for other observations. What else do we notice here? What about telephones? I think Jerry mentioned earlier, telephones and communication for Central and East are very high in 2020, right? What do you think is driving that?
I mean, are we speaking hypothetically, or is this based on real data?
This is actually real data. Yeah, we're working with real data. So what we're using is inference based on the temporal plane, based on the information we have, and we don't want to add in things that, in others, we're hypothesizing, right?
More people are working from home, so they need better equipment.
And telephones and communications could be part of that, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, it says telephones and communication. We don't know if that's mobile phones, right? We know that what telephones are, but I mean, are people really using handsets much, right? Are they using, you know, or are these voice over IP systems?
Or could it be routers? Anything that facilitates digital communication.
Possibly, right. So it warrants drilling into that to see what's driving that, because I find it hard to believe that it would be for your classic landline style phone. It may be, and it's possibly, so it would warrant going into it and finding out what's driving that.
Where are we on Show Me? Because I've been playing around with the different views and I can't find the one where we started.
We didn't use Show Me. We built this from scratch.
Okay. Then how do I get back?
All right. Did you have Where did you get lost? Like at what point?
I went into Show Me and I started playing with the different graph styles.
All right, why don't you do undo as many times as you need to get back to where we are?
Oh, it'll be a whole bunch.
Well, so why were you playing, Jer?
So I play.
All right, well, I don't know how many times it'll take you to undo, but and I don't know at what point
There we are.
you jumped off. Okay, good. Okay.
So there's okay. No chart in there. We just built a chart that's not on Show Me. Good enough.
Yeah, and keep in mind, show me's are about styles of charts. This is manipulating your chart based on your how you lay up the different dynamics in columns and rows and marks and what have you. So the only issue that we want to address right here is our scale, right? Now, in order to change our scale, what do you think we're going to need to do? Obviously, it's an edit of an axis, right? So if you right click on the numbers, the dollars, if you will, and go down to edit axis, here we're looking at a range that includes 0. Okay. And it's basically automatic and it's going from 0 to 183,277. So if you were to change your scale, what do you think would be the best option?
Independent axis ranges for each row or column.
Okay. Aha. And you see right away the chart updates behind the scenes. So let's close out the X and let's take a look. And here we have it. So things like scissors, low price items are still represented, right? We still see their sales, but now we have it scalar to the independent items, if you will. And I think this is more representative. Labels was another one, right? Now look at labels. Now we can actually see label data, which is helpful, right? You think that works better? I think so.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Visually, yes, but you're going to have an awful lot of explaining to do.
Why?
But you're going to have to say, you know, that when you're looking at labels, your scale is 1 to 3,000, but you know, when you're going over to bookcases, it's 0 to 10,000, 100,000.
Right. So for
the line,
each,
you can't compare the volume of sales just visually by looking at this chart.
that's correct. And you would want to preface your presentation, whatever it is that you're giving, to let individuals know that each category is scaled relative to that category. Very, very important. And you might even use labels as an example. You might say, given that sales of labels, they have lower price points, we have scaled this accordingly. Whereas you look at paper, it's a lot different, right? And office machines, you know, they tend to be higher priced. So you can't make inferences based on visually looking at the bar itself and making inferences in that regard, right?
You'd have to look at each different item independently.
Right. Right. And that's exactly how we set it up so that it would be treated independently. So you definitely would want to make sure that people know that. The other piece is once they start mousing over these different items, they would pick up on that as well. Right. Now, let's ask a quick question. Envelopes. We'll pick on envelopes. So envelopes, when I mouse over, sales says 28,347. So what do you think? Is that 28,000? What do you think?
You mean like you don't know if that's the number of items sold or the number? You'd have
Well,
to
no.
determine
It's dollar amount.
It is
Yeah.
dollars. Sales
that's
is
what I meant.
dollars.
Like, but they wouldn't know that unless you specified.
That's right. And one of the issues we have is the label for the sales amount is not set to currency. So that's a big problem there. So you would never want to put this chart out into a dashboard and have people look, as someone might say, well, oh, that's unit sales. I sold, 29,000 of these things, right? So first thing we want to do is go up to our sum of sales in our rows shelf. Okay. And we're going to click on format and let's change it so that our numbers are correct. We're going to go to currency custom. Let's keep it at 2 decimal places. And let's start with thousands and see what happens. Okay. Does that work for us?
I don't think you need the decimals.
Okay. But is it in thousands, do you think? I mean, these are categories. So more than likely, it's probably thousands. That makes sense. But do the decimals help us? And that's a good point, Jerry.
No,
Not really.
not on the scale.
Not right. So why don't we change that so that our decimal places are removed? Okay, again, we're just going up to sales on the shelf if you need to, if it disappeared. You want to go over to your numbers, right? Now, this is for our scale.
And we're doing it under axis and not pane.
We're doing it on axis right now, yes.
Right.
And notice what changed. We changed this, right? I was hoping someone
Right.
would pick up on that.
Yeah, no, I noticed
Yeah,
that too, but
no.
I also noticed that when you hover over each bar, you
Uh-huh.
still get the dollar amount also.
You do. That's correct. That's correct. So that being said, based on the change,
Can we
I just-
change the word sales to sales in dollars? Or just put the dollar sign in front of it?
and we did do that. The dollar sign is.
No,
in
I
front
mean,
of it.
on the word sales, that's
It's
like,
redundant. Yeah, it would be redundant.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not good to be redundant. I mean,
not bad. It's not
Well,
bad to
depending,
reinforce
you know,
the
how, I mean, if it called for it, I would, you know, you wouldn't have to because you could see the dollar figures
right.
right
And
next to it.
right. And here's one of the problems. This is a field called sales. So we can't change the field name because it is what it is. It's in the data. That's how it's represented.
Right, okay.
Well,
Right.
you can select on deselect show header and it'll take away the cells.
That's correct. You can. But let me ask you a question. Does
Oh,
that
Oh, I see. Yeah,
right?
Say sales in dollars by category over time.
Right.
You want
Here's,
it.
you could do that, sales in dollars in category over time. Absolutely. So why don't we change the sheet name?
Hmm.
All right. All right. Again, it's how do you communicate things? Some people might say, well, duh, it's dollars. It's right here. Right. So you could change the sheet name.
I just put the dollar sign in front of sales rather than adding a lot of letters. Dollar
okay.
sales by category over time. Dollar sign,
Yes.
space, sales by category over time.
Okay. So what do you think? Does that?
It just makes it clearer. It doesn't hurt.
I put sales space parentheses dollar sign.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And
No.
that's probably how I would do it. Again, it's tomato.
Right.
That's right. I would say whatever you do, be consistent from sheet to sheet, right?
Right.
So if you have that kind of qualifier right in front of something, so for example, maybe you want to emphasize that it's sales in thousands rather than millions. Just make sure that you're consistent from sheet to sheet, because when you bring those into a dashboard, the dashboards are competing with each other. And so visually, if it facilitates, if it helps the person viewing it, that's a good thing. But you don't want to, there's such a thing as overkill. And sometimes you have to ask for feedback from other people and say, what do you think? Is this too much?
Mhm.
You know, does this communicate effectively? What changes would you recommend? So
I
that's
guess
always,
another thing you could do is instead of saying over time, would it make sense to say year over year?
so YOY, right? Year over year. So instead of over time, you could do YOY, right? Technically,
I mean,
Why?
that way, you know, because when you're telling them that you're doing this, they're looking at it by year, not month or quarter.
Exactly. No, that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Yep. So these are all things that you can do to communicate effectively each element of this chart, and at the same time, think of the colors and how you're coloring things. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about is from sheet tab to sheet tab where we have region. Notice that region is colored in some of them, but not all of them. So if I pick on sales by department and region stacked, region has a color option, like a choice that I've chosen. You want to be consistent from sheet tab to sheet tab. So here I've got central is blue, east is pink, south is gold, and west is green, right? But if I come over here, I want to make sure that this is the same. You see? make sure that you haven't accidentally flipped your color so that west, the color for west is what it was for central over here, right? So be careful that the colors are consistent as well. That's another thing that's
Is there any
super-
way to upgrade, to make it universal through every tab without going tab by tab?
Well, what you can do is you can come in here and you can create a special color option. You can create a palette and assign it,
Right.
right? So you can either pick one of the defaults that are here and assign it and always use that one.
Right.
So my recommendation would be to build a palette that you like, and then you can assign that entire palette to whatever it is you're doing.
Each chart
You
independent.
got it. You
Okay.
got it. Yep. So here's an automatic one, but you could actually, select one of these, which is, like for example, if I went with winter, there's winter, and I can assign that palette. And now it's throughout the whole thing. Okay. Again, being cognizant of what the client might prefer and or what communicates information the best. That's really important. All right, we're going to create another sheet of all things, create another sheet. So we're going to click on create new sheet. This one, we're going to call it sales by state. Okay. Now, keep in mind, we're building a whole bunch of sheets here. And obviously, it's all linked to the same data, which is centralized, which is good. And if we were to build some dashboards, we don't have to include all the sheets in every dashboard, right? We could actually create dashboards that have just a few of the sheets, maybe that are logically grouped together. That's something to think about. How do we organize this in different dashboards? So the first thing we want to do, since we're working by state, is focus on the state field. Who knew, right? So in our tables area, you see state. And what we're going to do is double click on state. And when you do that, instantly Tableau says, oh, this is a geographic dynamic. We need to bring in our latitude and longitude. And all it has done is identified which state is which. Each of these dots is basically, hey, this is this state. This is this state. Okay, that's all it's done. It's put those dots in. Okay. And obviously that is done by it bringing in this mark, this mark for detail. Okay. So that's the first thing. The other thing to remember is if you have latitude and longitude already in your data, which we did not, but let's say you did, then obviously Tableau would look at it, but it's going to use its known good for latitude and longitude. And you have the option of accepting your data and its representation or what Tableau says it should be. We don't have an example of that tonight, but just so you know, Tableau goes and seeks out to, it goes to Mapbox, OpenStreetMap, a bunch of different sources and says, hey, when it's Wyoming, these are the possible latitude and longitude combinations for Wyoming. So it's got that subset memorized. You don't have to provide that information to it. Okay. All right. The next thing we're interested in is, yes, Jack.
Yeah, just a question. How does it, would you really have to zoom out to compensate for Alaska and Hawaii? Or is there a way to factor those in? Because all you see is the 48 states. I was just curious.
Yeah, so here's what you'd have to do, unfortunately. You would have to zoom out, and I don't find it to be very useful, but Alaska and what was the other one?
Hawaii.
Hawaii. Yeah, you would have to zoom out to some extent to see it.
There are no dots on Alaska or Hawaii.
There are not. Thank you. And what does that mean? What
They're
can you
they're not states. They've been kicked out of the union.
Oh, stop. Is it possible we don't have data?
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a possibility. I was just curious.
No. So Jack, whenever
There's no data in our data source for those states. So
that's
no
correct.
dots.
So what it's done is it's chosen to remove them from the equation, right? Because we don't have any data, and the data that we have are only for what we see here, right? Now, you might say to yourself, well, Mexico's here and we've got Canada, right? So this is one type of map. If you wanted, we're actually getting into our conversation about maps because we're going to be journeying, once we're done with Tableau here, we're going to be going into geo territory. This is a base map. This is what's called a base map. And in this base map, it's provided for, North America, South America, and a variety of regions, right? And so this is, this particular base map gives you that, but there's other types of base maps and you might choose for a different option, right? You could also choose map options up above, which we can do really quick. If you click on map and go down to background maps, you can change the style of map. So you can make it normal, right? Where it looks kind of like this, or you can change it to streets where it looks like this, right? And you can see, so each map has different options available to it. In this regard, now that we have all these islands and everything, it kind of gets really busy and it kind of takes away from what we were trying to accomplish. So I think one of the reasons we might go with a more bland map is because it's really about the sales data. But again, it's context. What are we trying to convey here? And that's what's most important. So I'm going to change it back to my light map, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Come on, right, like that, because I do want to see all of the states at once. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to, and this is really cool, I think you'll like this. We're going to take our sales attribute and we're actually going to drag it to, whoops, helps if I don't double click. I don't know why I'm doing that. We're going to drag it and lay it on top of the color shelf. Now this is kind of cool. This is kind of cool. Now remember, sales is about the sum of sales, right? And instantly it jumps out to us that we have 3 states that are very dark blue color: Massachusetts, Texas, and California. All right, so instantly we've created a different dynamic here, right? Now, does anyone or everyone should have automatic selected up top here under marks? Does everyone have automatic chosen there?
Yes.
Watch what happens when we change it to map. You see any change? No, it's the same. What are some things that, well, there are some things about this map that annoys me, but what are some things that maybe could be improved? For example, when you mouse over each one of these, it gives you the sales, right? But what is missing from that dollar amount based on our conversation earlier?
The symbol.
The dollars, right? The dollars, right? So we don't have the currency, we don't have the dollar sign, but just looking at this map and based on
States are just, the name of the states are just, you can't see them all.
say that again, I'm sorry, it cut out.
Well, the name of the states, they're just, you can't see them, read them very well.
Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. There's 2 things you can do. We can take the word state, which is up here, and we can drag it onto the label shelf. All right. That kind of helps. So visually, do you think it's better or worse?
So we're getting an eye appointment.
Exactly. Right. Better or
I
worse?
think in some ways it explains certain things because you see that certain states aren't labeled and it'll tell you
Exactly.
there's no data for that state.
Right, exactly. So what's kind of cool is even though we should know what each state is, some people aren't familiar, right? By putting the name on top of it, it helps. It really does. Now, I would say that the font could be a little bit smaller. So
We go
if you
to initials rather than full, like an NM or TX or.
Well, what you would have to do is you would actually have to change it and you have to have a special label. Right now it's using the
Okay.
data that's there. What we are going to do though is change the font so that it's a little bit smaller. So if you come up here to where it says state, but the one with the T next to it, and click on the drop down arrow and go to format. we can actually change our font. Okay. Right now it's a Tableau book font and it's a 9 point rather. What happens when we change it to 12? Does that make it better or worse? Sounds really funny. What do you think?
Don't see any change.
I didn't see any change. I wonder why. What happens when I make it bold? No change. So what am I changing? This is our default font. This is
Yeah, but you're doing that under the T. Shouldn't you be doing that under label?
where, and which one is the label though?
Oh, wait, label.
Yeah,
I'm
that
sorry. You're looking at it.
is.
Forgive me.
Yeah. So the question becomes, should we be in the header or in the pane?
In the pane.
You
Okay.
think? Oh, there we go. This is the same thing as before, right? So the header is a different area. It's not in our chart.
Now
if
the
I ch-
District of Columbia goes all the way from West Virginia out to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So that,
That gets it right. It's a little too big, right?
right.
So if I change it and I make it smaller, because really the goal was to make it visible but not intrusive. If we take it down to 8, that's better, right? That's better. It's not perfect, but it's better.
Bold makes it a little bit better too.
Okay, and so yeah, if you want to do bold, I didn't do that. That's a good idea. Bold makes it better, right?
So the darkness of the color for the state doesn't appear to have anything to do with the sales, because New York is pretty dark, but it doesn't appear there's any data in New York.
Actually, New York is not dark. You're talking Massachusetts. Are you?
You know, New York looks darker than some of the other states.
Yes, but now you're saying there's no sales, but I see there's sales. There's 500,000 in sales.
Okay, yeah, I don't see the label New York though.
That's a good point. I don't see it either. And it shouldn't be overlapping with anything. Huh.
Mhm.
That's kind of odd.
Yep.
That is kind of odd. Interesting. Michigan is here. I'm just seeing if I can see it anywhere. Oh,
Same
that's a
thing
good,
with Alabama. There are sales in Alabama, but there's no label.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's no label yet. They have sales.
Well, so here's the thing. The label is not placed based on whether there are sales. The label is based on the state existence, right? So, and so these are great points. The state is basically, the map knows where the state is, right? We brought the state in and it's representing it. So the question becomes, why is New York? We'll just pick on New York. Why is that label missing? So if you go to label, right? And you look at the alignment, there are different aligning options that you can do, right? There's also wrapping options. I don't think it's wrapping it. And you can change whether it's automatic left, right, center, and also vertically aligned. So I'm wondering if we changed the alignment, if that would help at all. So why don't you try that and see? I don't see much of a difference.
See any difference at all?
I don't see any difference. I went with a top alignment and that didn't do very, very much for it. So I'm going to go back to automatic. Interesting. Interesting. Now, here's an option to allow labels to overlap other marks. This option, just so you know, watch what happens when you choose it. There's your reason, because of overlap. If the words collide, so New York, New Hampshire, all those, these are clusters, right?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So now we have a conundrum. Do we obfuscate and see most of them, or do we allow and see, right? So that's something that you have to decide. So once you turn on allow labels, perhaps changing their alignment will help. Okay.
I don't like the labels. I'm taking them out.
There you go. I don't like the labels. I don't like the labels. All right.
It's funny, mine was by default unchecked, and as soon as I checked it, then the states that weren't labeled appeared.
Yes, well, that mine was by default as well. That's why I said click on it. And when you click on it, you see the states that weren't there. So does that make sense, Jack?
Crystal.
Yeah, so by default, it assumes that you don't want them overlapping because of the crowdness factor, it being crowded. But you can see the trade-off. There's going to be times where, you have to decide what it's going to look like. Now,
I think that it also doesn't make a huge, well, I guess to me, it makes sense that it wouldn't include like, that's by default kind of hiding the names because it's focusing on those that actually have more cells.
yes, right, exactly. Now, what happens when we drag sales over to our label? Oh, God help us. Now we've got a lot going on here. We've got sales in the state.
You could change the convert, what do you call it?
Scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I'm sorry, you put sales where?
I put sales onto the label. So I just drug it up to label.
It's interesting because I had the states turned off, and when I drew sales up to label, it put the states back in.
Interesting. Yes, that is interesting. Now, one thing you can do, notice that sales is just as large as the other. You can format, if you click on the drop-down arrow next to some sales, right? Whoops, let's do it again. You can actually format it so it's not as big. And you can also change the alignment for that particular item, irrespective of the other one. I'm going to change the numbers so that they are currency, but I'm going to get rid of the decimals. And I am going to change it to thousands. Okay, that does help a little, not a lot, but a little.
Yeah.
All right. So again, these are all things to think about. All things to think about. All right, we're going to click on the X and close out the format sales. I'm going to remove the label for the state. So I'm just going to drag that away and get rid of it and just keep the sales. I think that works. Again, I got rid of decimals, so that helps, right? So let's duplicate this sheet. We're going to right click on sales by state. We're going to duplicate it, and we're going to call this sales by postal code. That's the one we have not done yet. Many ways to mix this up. Now we're going to remove all of the marks that we have, but we're going to leave latitude and longitude alone because we still need those. We still need a map. Okay, so I just drug them off, got rid of them. And what I'm going to do is we're going to focus on postal code. But when you're designing postal code, that's even more granular than the state. You've got many postal codes in the state level. So when you add postal code to a map, you want to make sure that you remember that it could get super busy very fast. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take postal code and drag it over to detail. Now, what this has done is it's taken the postal code and identify where on the map that postal code is represented in the data. Okay, but it's not very friendly to look at. It's kind of jagged edge kind of thing going on. So it would help to have these as circular because right now they're very hard to read. So we're going to go up and click on the drop down arrow next to marks and map, and we're going to choose circle. That makes it a little bit better, a little bit easier to see. Okay.
Drop down arrow.
The drop down arrow next to it was map, and now we changed it to circle. You see that?
In marks, it was map. Okay, change it to circle. Got it.
Yep. Okay. So that's the first thing. We change it to circle. Now we're going to focus on sales again because that's what we're really emphasizing with these sheets. We're going to take sales and we're going to put it over the size shelf, okay? And when we do that, now we get something scalar, very much like the dots we worked with last week, okay? And you can see some of the dots are bigger than others, but some of them are so small we can't see them. So on the far right-hand corner where we have our legend, we're going to click on the drop-down arrow and go to Edit Sizes, and we're going to make it a little bit bigger. Kind of maybe like so. All right, and click OK. Wow, I made it really big in some cases.
I really like this. This is really cool because it's showing the concentration of cells based on those zip codes, right?
Absolutely, yep. So now here's the thing. If I mouse over on this big dot right here, right? It's postal code 01519, but you notice when I move it around, right? $579,000, that's the scale of that dot. What happens when I bring it down here to the second largest dot, 377? So you can see there's a huge difference, but you can see the difference between them scale wise. So now I have a good indication as to what these dots mean. This one is about $500,000, right? So now relative to the largest dot, I can make inferences about what the other dots may be. Okay, it does help. Now, if you feel you made the dots too big and you want to, change the scale again, you can do that. Sometimes we get a little optimistic. So I might change this just a tad, and it makes it a little bit easier to read, perhaps.
How do we do that again?
Yep. So you're going to go to the right-hand side, the far right.
Right.
Click on the little drop-down arrow by sum of sales. Click on Edit Sizes. All right.
Sum of sales, edit
Sizes.
and shelf, measure, attribute, dimension.
I
don't
don't
see
think
it.
you're not in the right spot. So you're going to the far right of your chart, all the
Okay.
way to the right by sum of sales, and choosing Edit Sizes. Do you
Okay.
see it? Yeah. And so this is basically, you can make it larger or smaller. Okay. Now another thing you can do, and you want to be careful with this, but right now it's sizing it automatically, right? But you can also do it by a range. Okay. So you could specify a start and an ending range that you want to work with. So let's try it. We're going to change it to sizes vary by range, and the start value for our range and the end value for our range. Let's think of logically what it's trying to accomplish. What should we put for the start value and the end value?
Well, the values would be the actual amount, right?
The dollars.
0?
Do you want to put 0 for the start?
I would think so. I would think so, or start at like or maybe 200,000. I guess it seems like there's not a lot under 0, so maybe 200K and
okay, great. So let's say we wanted to focus on a specific range. Let's say we decide, you know what, the little guys we don't want to see on the map, right? So let's do 200,000, right? And the high end, basically the 579, 495 is really the high end, right? It's right. So we'll go ahead and apply that and click OK. Now, interesting. We still have
I don't find edit sizes. I don't, sorry.
Okay. So you're going to go to the right-hand side.
I'm on the far right-hand side. I right click.
No, you're not right clicking. You're left clicking on the drop down arrow.
Drop down arrow.
Edit sizes.
I don't see a drop down arrow.
it's
Okay.
On the far right-hand side.
Right. If you take your mouse and just move it up to the far right where it says sum sales, and then move all the way over to the right of that box.
Where does it say some sales on the right? I see some sales under marks.
No, you're not looking at the right-hand side of the screen then. Jerry, you should have a sum sales like I do here on the right-hand side. You don't
I don't see it. I don't see it on your mouse.
You don't see.
I don't see your mouse. Are you moving your mouse?
I am.
Yeah, okay. I go all to the right-hand side.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you don't have a staggered legend that says less than or equal to 200,000, 300,000? You don't
No.
have that?
No.
Okay, is your map maybe it's not wide enough, or maybe it's too wide?
I don't see
So
it.
remember you stretch things out before? Here,
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead and share your screen? Maybe it's when you resized your map before, that could be it. Why don't you share and show me what you're looking at? Okay, you see your scroll bar on the vertical, I'm sorry, the horizontal, my bad. Yeah, it looks like you made it too wide. So zoom out using the zoom out tool, which is the minus sign. That I think that's in.
Like that minus sign.
Where the heck is your? Well, that's very strange.
Oh, happens to me all the time. It's
Can
true.
he,
Yeah.
can he go under dashboard and on the menu bar and try to maybe it has to be activated?
Yeah.
Like go to dashboard or story or analysis or one of those windows, all the way your menu bar all the way up on top.
Yeah. It looks like you hid your card. So
Not that one.
Analysis.
You can
let me.
click
All
on
right.
cards, right click
Yeah.
on, like, if you right click on like a space, sure. I mean, underneath a postal code.
Yep.
Just right, like just on the blank space underneath. Jerry, it's a little bit down, more down. Okay, just and then click on reset cards and see if that resets your cards. Did it not?
Yeah, there should be a way to get your cards back. And let me just see here.
Wait, the legends. Click on, right click and then click on legends. Oh, you don't have.
No, and that's weird.
His
Somehow
map
you
legend's grayed out.
yeah, somehow you hid your card. It's called a card, and you hid it. The question is how to get it
How do I
back.
find it? How do I get it back? Yeah.
The thumb is under tooltip. Jerry, move your thumb that's under your marks, move it over to size.
Move it to size.
And then, and there you go.
Okay.
And then now you can see it on the far right-hand side. You can see your legend.
Bingo, bingo.
Thank you.
Yes. So what did
And
you
this
learn,
is-
Jer?
I just learned to listen to Carolina.
Okay, but you still are not listening to me.
Yeah.
And I told you not to play. So yeah.
Edit sizes. Okay.
Right. So you're going to edit sizes and basically we did this last week. So you remember when
Yeah, we made it bigger and then we applied it.
That's right.
And then we wanted to set a range. Is that what we were doing?
We did a range, and does anyone remember what our range was?
200,000 to the max, 579.
You got it.
Start range value is 200,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And you should see a difference.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
You have to click on end. Oh, no, I guess you don't. Never mind.
Yeah, because technically the end is the top.
The top, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting that Dallas, Texas, and I don't know where in Massachusetts, which is the other one, the 01540, those cells are so high for this spreadsheet. I didn't expect that. It's just random. Like, why Massachusetts and like not New York or something like that?
Exactly. No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I think once you start visualizing the data in a different way, you start to see things you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
All right. So Jerry, I'm going to take over now that you're fixed, which is a good thing, All right. Okay, I promised to go into JSON territory. So why don't we save what we have here and save it up to Tableau public. Okay. Boop. And I'll save mine as well. And you want to replace it. This way you have known good. I'm going to overwrite. Ta-da! All right, and of course, when it launches in Tableau Public, you always want to make sure that it's looking exactly as you want it, right? So you have a lot of tabs there, by the way, now.
Mhm.
A lot to work with, right? A lot to work with. All right,
Not the way I want it at all,
what do you mean?
the way the map looks. Okay, I'm just gonna play with it and get it the way I want it.
Okay, well,
I'll
you do
save it
that.
again. I'll save it again.
You do that, yes. All right, so what we are going to do now is I'm going to bring up a website called geojson.io. All right, and I'm actually going to go to the root. Okay, so if you would browse there, I'd like to show you what GeoJSON is about. And I'm going to show you how to load a base map for Westchester and how to get the names of the cities in that map. Okay.
So we have to open a browser and go to geojson.io.
Yes. And when everyone's there, let me know. This, by the way, you want to bookmark this website if you want to do anything with JSON and or a variety of different formats, GeoJSON or otherwise. This is a great website. It's open source. Okay.
Bookmark, bookmark, bookmark.
Yeah, bookmark this. This is a really good one. So the first thing I want to do is walk you through the data set that I gave you earlier. And the data set I'm referring to is the, let's see here, the farmers markets. Okay, farmers markets. That CSV file, if you had a chance to open it, there's not a lot of records in it, but it does have latitude and longitude. Is everyone at least able to open up in Excel on another window, or at least on this window, minimize it when we're done? But did you see the nature of the data? It does have latitude, longitude. It has a geo reference in it.
Mhm.
The geo reference, just so you know, is a combination of latitude and longitude. It is concatenated with a comma between them. All right. So let me just show you what I mean in case you did not have a chance to open it. All right. Here's my data set that I have, and this represents in the county of Westchester. All right. A variety of different farmers markets. You can see the market name, the location, the address, the city, the state, the zip, right? The contact information, yada, yada. And then if you go to the right-hand side, you've got latitude, longitude, and a geo-reference, all right? Which again is a concatenation of the latitude and longitude with a comma in between them and wrapped with parentheses. So these are things that the website that we're going to be looking at can perceive, okay? So I am going to move Excel out of the way. I'm going to close that file. And everyone should have that file closed because I want to show you how to generate, not that, oh Lordy, hold on guys. Let me close him out. How to generate the GeoJSON file for that CSV file that we have. So does everyone understand what we're about to do?
I
I'm
can
assuming
hide
you're going to
Tableau.
try to import that CSV.
We are going to do that, yes. So we're going to click on Open, File, and we're going to click on the Farmers Markets Westchester.csv file. Okay. Now, when we do that, it's reading the data into JSON format. And we were talking earlier, what is JSON format? Well, you can see this is JSON format. You can see that it is programmatic in its form. It's wrapped by curly braces. There's a type, there's a collection of features. And when it references that collection, it's got all the different features. These are actually the columns that were in our spreadsheet. Okay.
Well,
Yeah. All right. So it can perceive the georeference, and it's mapped all of these things already for us on this map, just like that. All right. So each record, you can see if I scroll through this JSON file, is represented here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is walk you through, and again, we could spend lots of classes on geo anything, okay? But I'm just going to walk you through how to then say, well, here's my JSON data. What does my table look like?
So if
If I-
it had just its street address information without latitude and longitude, would it work?
It may. It may. It is always helpful to have the georeference if possible. If you don't, but you have other things like city, which is a georeference point, or state or zip, you need to give it as much data as you can in order to see it on the map, right? So if we wanted to see what the data looks like in a tabular format, we could click on table. All right. And so I'm going to just widen this a little. And
Table is where?
whoops. Table is
I see table.
okay. So here, if I look at my table, right, and I scroll down to the bottom of my screen, and let me maximize this so I can see, I should be able to use my scroll bar to scroll over to the far right, where I see the latitude and longitude.
Mhm.
And here it is. Okay. So this is the data that we saw in our Excel spreadsheet. Now this is a confirmation. This is our, the data that we have just pulled in. Okay. Now, one thing that we want to do, and one thing that is really important, if we want to bring this data as a geo reference data set into Tableau, saving it as a GJSON or a GeoJSON is a good thing to do. So the way that you do that is you go up to save and go down to GeoJSON. Now you can see there's different formats that we could save this as. All right, we're going to just talk about GeoJSON tonight. There's also KMLs, shapefiles. Those are all map related files types. We're going to just save it as a GeoJSON file. And when you do that, you can actually save it. Let me just go to my folder here for week 4. I'm just going to call it Farmers Markets. Farmers Markets.
Where did it save it to?
I don't know.
Save GeoJSON, save file.
And then click save.
Click OK.
All right. So now I have a farmersmarket.geojson file that I could bring into any map program, or I could bring it into Tableau.
Oh, it's just in downloads. Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. All right. So now I have a GeoJSON file that I can work with. All right. In any map related software. Okay. Does that make sense? Now, when you go to a place like Westchester and you look at their data that they provide, and by Westchester, I'm going to walk you through. Let's go to Westchester. All right. It's gis.westchestergov.com. All right, and the URL is on my screen here. It's gis.westchestergov.com, and I'll post it in the chat here for you. Okay. Westchester and almost all counties have a data-driven GIS site where they provide these types of files to people that are interested in doing GIS projects. Okay. And you can see there's some of those projects and what have you. If you scroll down to the Explore and Download Countywide data sets by categories, you can see there's a variety of different categories that you can work with. Okay. Everyone see that there on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just explain, and I'm going to focus on just these two things, base map, planimetrics, and boundary. Boundary is basically, I want to have the surrounding perimeter, I'll use that term because that's a friendly one, of a given area. So think of it as like, I want to see just this county, like Westchester County. What are the boundaries? The boundaries would be the whole county and how it's broken up by cities, right? So if you think about it, or municipalities, right? So let's say you want to find a boundary-based map to get you started. You don't want to see the whole United States. You want to see just the boundaries, right? So if I click on that, the first thing that Westchester gives you is municipal boundaries. Okay. And when you click on that, it takes you into here. And sure enough, this map right here in dark blue is the boundary map for Westchester County. And the reason I'm showing this is I'm going to show you then how to bring this into Tableau. And we're just basically going to add the cities kind of like they have here. We're going to replicate this, but in Tableau. All right. So these are boundaries. What are the boundaries? The larger one is the county. The smaller is the city within the county. So each one of these has a polygon associated with it. All right. Does that make sense to everyone? Because I don't want to be talking
What
Greek.
do we mean by polygon?
Polygons are these individual shapes. These are all
It's
polygons.
just a shape. A polygon's just a shape.
If you want to simplify it, sure. It's
Yeah.
just a shape, but I need to, there's math behind it.
Yeah.
There's latitude and longitude related to that shape,
Mhm.
right? And literally that you can identify mathematically each one.
Right.
So that you can identify it. And let me show you what I mean. When I click on Bedford and I come down here, Bedford has an object ID associated with it. It has the name, square miles, and the length of that shape. Okay. That data is in the JSON data set, the GeoJSON data set. And that's how it's able to replicate it in another program like Tableau. Okay.
Mhm.
And again, without getting too technical, that's basically how it's done. So that being said, let's bring Tableau back up. And I had accidentally shut mine out. So let me bring it back up. All right. So now that we have a little bit of map lingo in our coffers, our mental coffers, let me move this guy out of the way. Let me maximize this guy. All right, we're going to, you have no
Yeah.
projects open up, right?
Okay, so I should close the Superstore project.
Yes, we want to close out Superstore and make sure you've saved it because you worked really hard on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can close out Tableau and restart it, you said?
You don't have to close it out. You can just do file close to close out Superstore.
Gotcha.
And yeah, what I did is I accidentally closed mine out before.
Right.
So yeah,
I just
I had
want to
two
make sure. So I'm just going to go to file close. Right?
all right. All right.
That's-
So you
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just, oh man, why that? All right. So go to file and then just click close, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And I'm back to where it says connect open. Got it. Okay.
Yep. And that's what we want. So before we connected to a text file, which was a CSV file. All right. And that may be, you know, what you want to connect to at a given time. What we're going to actually connect to is a spatial file. Now, before we do that, we might be tempted to connect to a JSON file, but a raw JSON file is not the same as a GeoJSON file. Okay. So we want to choose spatial file. Okay. And when you do that, you want to point to your municipal boundaries GeoJSON
Mhm.
file that you downloaded earlier.
Okay, I didn't, oh, there it is. Okay. There's a
Okay.
dash under there. And click open.
Okay. So in that municipal boundaries GeoJSON file, which I got from Westchester, right? And we just looked at the data, but in that online website, you can see that the object ID is there, the name of the municipality, the square miles, the shape length, and the fact that it's a polygon. And in some cases, it's a multi-polygon. That's the geometry.
Mhm.
Notice that geometry is what allows it to be perceived on a map. It's got the map symbol there.
Mhm.
Okay. Pretty cool, right? We're going to go to sheet 1. Okay, and we are going to double click on geometry.
There
when
it
you-
is.
And when you do that, you've replicated your map. Now, notice when you mouse over your map, those polygons are represented, right? You've got dark border lines around them. That is by the way, the borders that we were looking to see. But what is missing is the city, right? So again, your Westchester map that's all generated by the JSON file, okay, which is kind of cool. What we are going to do is drag name down to detail in the marks area. And when we do that now, when we mouse over each of those polygons, we have our wonderful names of our cities. Okay, so what we've basically done is we've built a map using the data that we pulled from Westchester, and we have added the name to this particular file. Okay, pretty cool, right?
Mhm.
So what did you learn? What's the difference between this map and the other maps that we did?
We created this one. We were able to formulate this from either a CSV or how do I say it? I'm trying to remember. Did we uploaded the CSV, or did we upload the GeoJSON up to geojson.io?
You could actually do one way and go back to a CSV, but we did CSV. So we opened up the CSV, and we actually did the one for the farmers markets and saved it out. This particular one, the municipal boundaries, I provided to you. I got it from the Westchester website, right? Right. So this one, actually, I did not have the CSV, but you could have done that the same way as we did the farmers
So
markets.
how do we overlay the farmers markets onto this map?
So the farmers markets are basically going to be added into this map by connecting the data. And unfortunately, we don't have time to do that tonight.
Mhm.
All right. But what you're basically doing, and let me go ahead and bring up our spreadsheet for our farmers markets. Let me just show you here. And this is where data cleaning is very, very important. So let me open up farmers markets and bring it over here. Okay. So we have a field in common between them. We have name from municipal boundaries, and that is basically our city. All right. And our city is right here. Okay. Now we have a problem, because if we were to join these two data sets, whether they're JSON or CSV or whatever, if these don't match, and this is the only thing we can join it on, we're not going to get a good match. So one problem I see is Hastings on Hudson in this spreadsheet. Now this is the farmers market spreadsheet. What is Hastings on Hudson on what does the county, the Westchester GIS folks say? Is there a Hastings on Hudson in here? We could actually look at it in our data. Is there a Hastings on Hudson?
Usually it's
just
over
that
by
was
like
there. It
Croton,
was there.
Harmon,
Yeah,
Croton on the
yeah,
Hudson.
you got it. If there it
Okay.
is. Yeah.
Okay, but what's the problem? Could I match that
The
up?
SON.
The
Hudson's
SON.
written, yeah, Hudson's written out here, but not in the spreadsheet.
And what else? We got dashes in this
Dashes,
one
yeah, dashes.
and not in the other. So here's the point. If you were to match the two, okay, if you were to match the two, you want, and you're doing it by city, you would want them to be identical. It's doing a literal match.
Right.
Tableau is going to say match them like kinds, right? And when you start having variations, there's another problem. In your spreadsheet for the farmers markets, and let me bring it back up.
Mamaroneck town,
Yes.
Mamaroneck village, okay.
Yes. So here they split out. I can't say it. So
Mamaroneck.
thank you, Jerry. Right? They spell that out 3 different ways. Actually, 2 of the same, right? But in our farmers markets, it's not that. So we'd have to do some data cleaning.
Interesting.
To be able to match them up. Okay. Really important. So that's something, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do data cleaning tonight,
No, they do have a Mamaroneck Town and Mamaroneck Village.
And the farmer's market file?
No, I'm
No.
looking at the map file.
I
Okay.
had a feeling. Okay. Yeah, I've checked this, Jer. So they're
Okay,
not
yeah,
the
yeah,
same.
right.
Yep, they're not the same. So what you would have to do is make sure that everything is the same. Then you would be able to bring in your farmers markets, all right, and join them. Okay. And you can see I have the farmers markets here. I could bring it in and attempt to join it. And I'm just going to quickly demo this because we don't have time to go through it, but I brought it in and then I come down here and I'm going to select my name field and it's got to be equal to my city field.
Okay, so you
And
don't have to rename the fields because you can do that here. To match. to make
rename
it-
the fields.
You didn't have to
No.
rename the city field in the spreadsheet name.
No, you would never do that.
I wouldn't
So,
want
so
to.
you're
no.
saying you wouldn't have to do data cleanup, you could do this?
Right.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Ah, okay.
You wouldn't
No.
have to rename the field. You can match the field.
You would not have to rename the field, but what I just did is not going to work because there's a mismatch. So
Right.
not all of them are going to be represented.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not all of them are going to be represented at this point. Okay, so if I were to then come over to sheet 1, I have 2 tables. I have municipal boundaries and I have these tables up here, the farmers market rather. But when I go to drag in, for example, if I were to drag in the farmers market name and put it on the detail, I'm not going to get it for all of them. Ah, there's one, Yonkers. There's one, but
Mhm.
now, and there's White Plains, but I don't have it for North Castle. I don't have it for Bedford. So some of these have farmers markets, yet they're not represented.
Right.
And that's because we got to do a little data cleaning. Okay. All right. So case in point, you could go JSON to JSON file and you can match it based on like kinds, right? It could be, and they don't have to be named the same as long as the data is the same, and it will do a match for you. Hence the importance of data cleaning. Okay.
Now, why would you do something where you have Mamaroneck Town and Village, but you don't know based on the spreadsheet which one it is?
So here's the thing. If there's a differentiation between town and village, you would want to make sure that that differentiation is picked up on both. If the farmer's market doesn't have, let's say it's not the village, but it's the other one, then you might want to normalize the farmer's market because this is representing farmers markets, right? So
Right.
make it right that it would give into the farmers market way of doing things. Okay. When you start combining different things for a given county, then you have to ask yourself, how are we going to normalize it across the way so that everyone is talking the same thing? And it gets a little tricky. My recommendation would be to have a separate map for farmers markets, norm it, then have a separate map for, let's say, rivers and streams or wineries, where there is differentiation, and have separate sheet tabs. For
But my
these.
question is, we have one, I'm looking at it, looks like there's one farmer's market. It just says Mamaroneck. We don't know whether it's in the town or village.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. So we would have to fix our data.
So we'd have to look at the address that they have for it.
Yep. And
And
where's the
yes.
boundaries? Yep. And where are the
Right.
boundaries? You got it.
Okay.
You got it. Yep.
So that
So
would be a lot of,
well, and that's
detail
the
work.
data cleaning part, but that's also the domain knowledge part.
right.
So that's very important in others to have a good understanding. And again, if the goal is to represent farmers markets in Westchester County, well, what do we know about farmers markets and how do people recognize them, right? Is town and village a differentiator or not? If it's always in the town and never in the village, then you strip off the village, right? So you want to norm them, and you can do that very easily. You could have take your GeoJSON data set for your municipality and change the data values, and then they're matching.
So you
Okay?
just call it Mamaroneck and you take out town and village.
Exactly right. And then everyone will say, oh, they match. It's perfect. Yep.
Okay.
So these are things to think about. And again, having domain knowledge about, the customers that, attend farmers markets, if it's always in one place and it's not in the other, right? It would never be in the village or vice versa. Then you norm it around what is known to be true. Okay. All right. So if you want to go ahead and save that to your to Tableau Public, go for it. And that is pretty much it.
Yeah, I saved it up to that point. I called it farmers market _ Westchester.
There you
I
go.
figure we'll pick it up from there, right? So you're going to do an additional offline video?
Actually, no, because geo, in order to really delve into geo, at a lengthy purpose, it would take many
Okay,
classes.
gotcha.
Yeah. So this was just to get you exposed to the differences of maps. And when we have the full United States map, it looks one way. How do we get so that we focus on just a county? So this is just a very small introduction.
Sorry. I have a colleague of mine who was doing GIS related map data in Python, and he was asking a group of us if he was having problems with zip code and mapping, and he gave me his code samples, his data, and I was wondering if maybe on Monday I could run it by you.
Well, actually, you can.
It doesn't have to be, I could share the data with you, and I could share the details of what kind of problem he said he was experiencing.
Absolutely,
and if there was just a way I could help relay the information
absolutely. Yeah, if you could email me the data, that would be helpful. And this way I have some context, sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I asked him 20 questions, and I'm still asking him questions so I can get all the data. It's not time sensitive.
Yep. Okay. No worries. Okay, good. Yeah. And as you can see though, that when you have geo anything, zip codes are important. Case sensitive. Yes. The street is important, especially if you're doing waypoints and you're mapping the points on a map very specific to the street level, right? So there is a lot to learn with geo. What I do want to share with you, I have a link here. I just got to grab it. It's a free book. And I just got to find it here. Here we go. I'm going to put it in chat. This is a list of some free GIS books. If you want to get into GIS and have at it, they're really good starting points, and they're free, which is a cool thing. Okay, so they're PDFs. You can download them and what have you. And there are people that just specialize in GIS because it's a field all to itself.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
it'll just
get, you're welcome. It'll just get you started. Again, there is math involved in some cases, and understanding maps and math related to maps is also something that is important. All right. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. I was just going to do that.
Get it.
You got it, Julia?
Yep.
Awesome.
GIS.